If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is Martin Holloway. I've been a park ranger for 12 years, but this is my first autumn at Olympic National Park. The trees here are different from Yellowstone, taller, older, with moss hanging from them like green beards. Everything feels ancient and quiet, except for the constant sound of Granite Falls in the distance. I asked for this posting, begged for it actually. After what happened in Yellowstone, I needed somewhere far from people, somewhere I could be alone with. My thoughts, well, not completely alone. I have Duke, my German Shepherd. He was a military dog in Korea, like I was a soldier there. A dying friend gave him to me, and now we take care of each other. Duke understands me better than any person could. He doesn't ask about my limp or why I wake up screaming some nights. He doesn't mention how I sometimes stare at my wife's photo for hours. Margaret's been gone 2 years now. Cancer took her fast, while I was still trying to heal from my own wounds, the ones you can see on my leg and the ones you can't. The ranger station they assign me is the most remote in the park. It's a small wooden cabin with a metal roof that makes too much noise when it rains, which is almost every day here. The nearest road is 5 miles away, and the closest person is another ranger named Todd, who I see maybe once a week when we check in by radio. "Holloway, you settling in okay?" Todd asked during our first radio call. "Fine," I said. "I've never been much for talking, and that hasn't changed. It gets lonely up there," he warned, "especially this time of year when the hikers stop coming." I almost told him that's exactly why I wanted this post, but I just thanked him and signed off. The truth is, I'm still trying to forget the 3 hikers I couldn't save at Yellowstone. They fell through ice while I was on duty. I heard their screams on the wind. By the time I got there, the cold water had already taken them. My boss called it bad luck, but I know better. I was too slow, too distracted thinking about Margaret, too broken to do my job right. So now I'm here, where the fog gets so thick you can't see your hand in front of your face, where the waterfall's roar drowns out everything else, where the trees grow out of fallen logs in strange lines that look like nature is playing a trick on you. Duke and I patrol the same 5-mile stretch every day. I check the few trails that remain open, make sure the signs are still up, and look for any stupid campers who might have ignored the no camping markers. It's easy work, peaceful, or it was, until 3 weeks ago, when a hiker came running into my station at sunset, his face white as paper. Someone was calling my name, he said, his hands shaking as he held the coffee mug I gave him. Out in the woods, but I was alone on the trail, completely alone. I told him it was just the wind. That sounds play tricks in these forests, that he should stick to the marked paths and head back to the main visitor center before dark. But after he left, Duke wouldn't stop pacing by the door, his ears alert, a low growl building in his chest. That night, I dreamed of Margaret. She was standing in the mist by Granite Falls, calling my name. When I reached for her, she smiled with a mouth that split vertically instead of horizontally, full of needle-like teeth. I woke up sweating, my hand already clutching my father's hunting knife from under my pillow. "Just a dream," I told Duke, who had his head resting on my chest, his brown eyes watching me carefully. But we both knew something wasn't right in these woods. And a few days later, when the first hiker went missing, I would learn just how wrong. And things really were. The first person to go missing was a college student named Brian. He had planned a 3-day hike but didn't check out when he was supposed to. That happens sometimes. Hikers change their minds or get lost. But something about this felt wrong. I found Brian's backpack on the trail near Granite Falls, neatly placed, like someone had set it down carefully. His water bottle was still half full, his trail mix open. It looked like he had stopped for a snack and then just walked away. Duke sniffed the backpack and whined, his tail tucked between his legs. I'd never seen him act like that before, not even in Korea when bombs were falling. "What is it, boy?" I asked, but he just kept whining. I called it in and the search team came. They searched for 3 days but found nothing else. No footprints, no signs of a bear or other animals, nothing broken or disturbed in the woods. Brian had vanished. A week later, it happened again. A woman in her 50s, an experienced hiker who came to the park every year. Same story. Her gear found on the trail, no signs of trouble, just gone. After the second disappearance, I started to notice other strange things. The forest was too quiet. Usually, you'd hear birds calling, squirrels running through leaves, all the small sounds of life. But in a 5-mile circle around Granite Falls, there was nothing but the sound of water and wind. And the trees, some of them had their bark peeled off in weird spiral patterns like someone had taken a knife and carefully carved them. I took photos and showed them to Todd when he visited. "Probably just teenagers," he said with a shrug. "They come up here, drink beer, do stupid stuff." But the damaged trees were miles from any easy access point, and some were over 30 feet. Up, no teenager could reach that high. I started finding dead deer too. No wounds, except a small clean cut on their throats. No meat taken, no signs of feeding, just bodies with no blood in them. After the third person vanished, a young man on a day hike, my radio started acting strange. In the evenings, when I made my check-in calls, there would be long stretches of static, and beneath it, something that sounded like whispering. "Repeat that?" Todd would say. "You're breaking up, Holloway." But I hadn't said anything. One night, after a particularly bad radio session, I sat on my porch with Duke, watching the mist roll through the trees. My leg was aching, it always does when the weather turns cold, and I took a sip from my silver flask. Margaret's initials caught the last light of day. M-E-H, Margaret Elizabeth Holloway. That's when I heard it for the first time. Martin. It was faint, just barely louder than the falls in the distance. A woman's voice, Margaret's voice. Duke heard it too. He jumped to his feet, hackles raised, growling at the wall of mist that surrounded the cabin. "Margaret," I said, even though I knew it was impossible. "Martin, help me." The voice came from the tree line, maybe 50 feet away. I grabbed my flashlight and gun, standard issue for rangers in areas with large predators, and limped toward the sound. Duke pressed against my leg. The beam of light cut through the mist, but showed nothing but trees and more mist beyond them. "Hello," I called. "Is someone there?" No answer, just the endless rushing of the waterfall. I turned to go back to the cabin when my light caught something hanging from a tree branch. A small silver object swinging gently in the breeze. It was a locket. I recognized it immediately because I had given it to Margaret on our 10th anniversary. Inside was a tiny photo of us on our wedding day. The locket that had been buried with her 2 years ago in a cemetery over 1,000 miles away. I stumbled back to the cabin, locket clutched in my hand, and locked the door. That night I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the wall, gun in my lap, while Duke paced in front of the windows, growling at shadows that seemed to stretch and move in ways shadows shouldn't. In the morning, I hiked down to the ranger station where Todd worked and asked him about the history of Granite Falls. Anything strange ever happen up there? Any stories? Todd looked uncomfortable. He glanced around, even though we were alone in the station. "There are always stories in places like this," he said finally. "The Kino tribe called this area the Place of Whispers. They said there was something in the forest that learned your name and called you into the mist. They wouldn't go near Granite Falls, especially in autumn when the mist comes." "And the Park Service? Any records of strange incidents?" Todd sighed and pulled out an old file cabinet. "Every 30 years or so, there's a cluster of disappearances. 3 or 4 people over a few months, usually starting in October. Then it stops and everything goes back to normal. The official explanation is always mountain lions or bears or people getting lost. But, but what? My grandfather was a logger here in the 1920s. He said they found strange things in the woods, footprints that didn't look human, trees marked with symbols, and they all heard the whispers. I showed him the locket, told him about Margaret's voice in the mist. You should request a transfer, Todd said, his face serious. Get out of Granite Falls, now, before a loud crack of thunder cut him off. Outside, a sudden storm had rolled in, darkening the sky tonight at midday. Rain pounded on the roof like someone was throwing rocks. Looks like you're staying here. Tonight, Todd said. The path back to your cabin gets dangerous in rain like this. I agreed to stay, but that night as the storm raged, I dreamed of the falls, of Margaret calling me, of something tall and thin standing behind her, its limbs stretching impossibly long, its body hidden against the trees like it was part of them. I woke, sweating, convinced someone was watching me through the window. But all I saw was mist, pressed against the glass like a face trying to look in. I went back to my cabin the next morning, even though Todd begged me to stay. Someone needed to watch that part of the forest, and I wasn't about to run away from whatever this was. I'd faced worse in Korea. At least that's what I told myself. Path was muddy from the storm. About halfway back, I noticed something strange. Footprints crossing the trail. They started out looking human, normal size. But as they went on, they got longer and deeper, like whatever made them was getting heavier with each step. I followed them for a while, until they simply stopped at the base of a massive old tree. Duke refused to sniff the tracks. He kept his distance, watching the tree like he expected it to move. Back at the cabin, I spread out a map of the park on my table and marked where each of the 3 hikers had disappeared. I added the locations of the strange trees with peeled, Ibak, the dead animals, and where I'd found the locket. Looking at it all together, I saw a pattern. Everything was happening in a rough circle around Granite Falls. That night, I tried calling Todd on the radio, but all I got was static and those whispers again. This time they were clearer. Some sounded like pleas for help, others like screams cut short, and underneath it all, Margaret's voice saying my name over and over. I threw the radio against the wall. It's not her, I told Duke, who looked up at me with sad eyes. Margaret's gone. The next day I hiked to the waterfall. I'd been avoiding it, to be honest. Something about the constant roar, the endless mist it kicked up. It felt wrong, but I needed to see it, to check if there was anything there that might explain what was happening. Granite Falls drops about 100 feet down a cliff face, crashing into rocks below, before flowing into a fast-moving river. The mist is so thick there that you get soaked just standing nearby. As I walked along the cliff edge, looking down at the falls, I noticed something behind the water, a dark opening, like a cave. That wasn't on any of the park maps. I made my way down a steep path to the bottom of the falls, my bad legs screaming, in pain with each step. Duke stayed close, unusually quiet. The roar of the water was deafening, the mist so thick it was hard to breathe. But I could definitely see it now. A cave entrance behind the waterfall, partially hidden by the flowing water. I was about to try to get closer when Duke suddenly barked and took off running back up the path. I called after him, but he was gone, vanished into the mist. That wasn't like him at all. He'd never left my side before. "Duke!" I yelled, but my voice was swallowed by the roar of the falls. I climbed back up the path, calling for Duke the whole way. No sign of him. I spent hours searching until the light began to fade, and I knew I needed to get back to the cabin before dark. When I finally reached the cabin, I found Duke sitting on the porch, waiting for me. Relief washed over me, but it didn't last long. There was something wrong with him. He wouldn't come when I called, just sat there staring at me with eyes that seemed different, empty somehow. "Duke," I said softly, approaching slowly. He growled, not his usual protective growl, but something deeper, more threatening. Then I noticed that his collar was missing. The military tags he always wore were gone. I backed away and went inside, locking the door. Duke had never stayed outside at night before, but he lay down on the porch and didn't try to come in. All night, I could hear him pacing back and forth, occasionally growling at the forest. In the morning, Duke was gone again. But hanging on, my doorknob was his collar, the metal tags dented and scratched like something had been chewing on them. That was when I decided to talk to the locals. The Park Service might dismiss the disappearances as accidents, but if the Quinault people had stories about this place, maybe they knew something that could help. I drove to the nearest town and found a small museum of local history. The woman working there, an older Quinault lady named Mary, went still when I mentioned Granite Falls. "We don't talk about that place," she said quietly, "especially not now, when the taking time is here." The taking time? She sighed and looked around, then motioned for me to follow her into a back room. On the wall hung a large hide with paintings on it, stick figures being pulled into a dark shape. Beside it were older photos of the forest dating back to the 1890s. In one, a group of Russian loggers stood in front of a massive tree. "Every 33 years, the taker wakes up hungry," Mary explained. "The Russians brought it here, though. They didn't mean to. It followed them from their homeland. They called it something else." She said a word I couldn't pronounce. It means the End Walker in their language. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "A spirit, a hungry one. It learns your name by listening, then calls you with the voices of those you love most. Once you answer, once you follow." She ran a finger across her throat. "And it's been doing this since the 1890s? Mary nodded. 1891, 1924, 1957, 1990, and now 2023. Always the same. 3 or 4 disappear, then it sleeps again. How do you stop it?" The old woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't. You stay away from Granite Falls in the taking time. You cover your ears if you hear your name in the forest. You never go alone. But people are missing. I need to find them." Mary's face softened. "They're already gone, Ranger. Their voices belong to the taker now." I didn't want to believe her. It sounded like superstition, like stories told to scare children away from dangerous areas. But then I thought of the footprints that got longer as they went. The whispering, radio, Margaret's voice in the mist, and her locket that should have been buried with her. On my way back to the cabin, I stopped at the general store and bought supplies, ropes, flashlights, extra batteries, and matches, lots of matches. As I drove the lonely road back toward my station, I saw Duke sitting in the middle of the road, watching my truck approach. I stopped and called to him through the open window. He stood up slowly, and for a moment, I thought he was coming back to me. Then he turned and walked into the forest. Just before he disappeared into the trees, he looked back at me once, a look so sad and human that it made my heart ache. Then he was gone. When I got back to the cabin, I found all my windows open. Inside, the place was freezing cold. On my table, someone had arranged small objects in a perfect circle. Margaret's hairbrush that I kept in my footlocker, my army dog tags, photos from my wallet, a half-written letter to my sister that had been in my desk drawer. In the center of the circle was a small pile of short, thin objects that looked like dried mushrooms. It took me a moment to realize what they really were. Human vocal cords, withered and preserved like leather. Something had been in my cabin. Something had gone through my things, and it wanted me to know. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I pushed my bed against the door and sat with my back to the wall, gun in my lap. Every sound made me jump. The wind in the trees, branches, scraping against the roof, the distant roar of the falls. Around midnight, the temperature in the cabin dropped so low I could see my breath. The lamp on my desk flickered, then went out, even though I'd just put in new batteries. In the sudden darkness, I heard something moving on the porch, slow, heavy steps that didn't sound like Duke. They circled the cabin once, twice, stopping at each window for a few seconds before moving on. Then came the whispers, right outside my door. Martin. Not Margaret's voice this time, it was my father's voice. My father who had died when I was 20. Son, let me in. I'm cold out here. My hand tightened on the gun. You're not my father, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Low laugh, then my sister's voice. Marty, please, I'm scared. Then a young man's voice I didn't recognize at first. Ranger Holloway, can you help me? I think I'm lost. Brian, the first missing hiker. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the voices kept coming. People I knew, people I'd lost, even the hikers who had disappeared. All begging me to open the door, to let them in, to come outside. By dawn, they were gone. I must have dozed off for a few minutes because I woke to silence and pale light coming through the windows. My body ached from sitting against the wall all night, my bad legs stiff and painful. I forced myself to get up, to make coffee, to try to think clearly. Whatever was happening, I needed to act. More people would go missing if I didn't. I reported the strange events to park headquarters, but I could tell from their responses that they thought I was losing it. Maybe I was, but the missing hikers were real. The vocal cords on my table were real. I'd carefully put them in a plastic bag as evidence. I spent that day researching in the small collection of books at the ranger station. One book about local history mentioned the Russian logging camp from the 1890s. There had been deaths there, men found with their throats cut open, but no other wounds. The camp was abandoned after a cave-in killed several loggers who were exploring a system beneath Granite Falls, the same cave I had seen behind the waterfall. That night, the radio came to life on its own. Through bursts of static, I heard a conversation between two men speaking Russian, then a scream cut off suddenly, then silence. I needed to check that cave, but I also needed help. This was too big, too strange for one ranger with a bad leg and a missing dog. The next morning, I drove down to make a personal report to the park superintendent. Halfway there, I found the road blocked by a massive landslide, tons of rock and dirt that would take weeks to clear. I tried to call it in, but my radio picked up nothing but static and those damn whispers. I was cut off. No way out except on foot through miles of forest. No way to get help. When I got back to the cabin, I found Duke's dog tags hanging from my door handle. Just the tags, no collar. They were bent and twisted into a strange symbol that looked like an eye. Inside, on my wall, something, had used what looked like coal to draw a crude map. It showed the waterfall, the cave, and a path leading deep inside. At the end of the path was a small stick figure with a pronounced limp. Me, it was an invitation, or a trap, probably both. I spent that day preparing. I made torches from branches and rags soaked in lamp oil. I found an old flare gun in the emergency kit. I sharpened my father's hunting knife until it could slice paper. I hammered nails through a piece of wood to make a crude weapon. As the sun began to set, I heard Duke barking in the distance. Not his normal bark, but something desperate and afraid. Then a yelp suddenly cut off. "I'm coming, boy," I whispered, tucking the knife into my belt. I waited until first light the next morning to head out. The mist was thicker than ever, clinging to the ground like it was alive. The forest was completely silent except for the distant rush of the falls. As I hiked, I found more of those trees with the bark peeled in spirals. Some had fresh marks, the exposed wood still damp. On one tree, someone had carved a simple message. "Come alone about a mile from the falls." I smelled something that didn't belong in a forest, like copper and the air after a lightning strike. The hair on my arms stood up, and every instinct told me to turn back, but I kept going. I reached the top of the falls and looked down at the churning water below. The cave entrance was clearly visible now, a dark mouth behind the curtain of water. The path down was treacherous, slippery with moss and spray from the falls. Taking a deep breath, I started down. My bad leg protested with every step, the old, shrapnel wound, sending shots of pain up to my hip. Halfway down, my foot slipped on a wet rock. I fell hard, tumbling several feet before catching myself on a small tree growing from the cliff face. As I hung there, catching my breath, I saw something move at the bottom of the path. Something tall and thin, standing perfectly still beside a tree. At first, I thought it was just another tree. Its skin looked like birch bark, mottled white and grey. Then it moved, stretching impossibly long limbs to grab the trunk of a nearby pine. It had no face, just a smooth area where a face should be. Then, as I watched, a vertical slit opened in that blank surface, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. I froze, clinging to the small tree, not daring to move. The creature tilted its head, as if listening or smelling the air. It stretched one arm, much longer than any human arm could reach, and touched the path where I had just been standing. Then it looked up, directly at me. I heard Margaret's voice. Again, but this time it came from that vertical slit in the creature's non-face. "Martin, why did you let me die alone?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I had been away when Margaret died, at a training session in another park. By the time I got the message and rushed to the hospital, she was already gone. The creature took a step toward the path, its body moving in a way that wasn't quite right, like it had too many joints, or they bent in the wrong directions. I had to move. Now. I scrambled down the path as fast as I dared, not looking back. When I reached the bottom, the creature was gone, but I could feel eyes on me from the forest. The cave entrance was just a few yards away now, behind the curtain of falling water. I would get soaked going through it, but I had no choice. I wrapped my supplies in a waterproof bag, took a deep breath and ran. The roar of the falls was deafening as I passed through the water. It hit me like a hammer, nearly knocking me down. Then I was through, standing in the mouth of the cave, dripping wet and gasping for breath. The cave floor sloped downward into darkness. Cool air flowed from deep inside, carrying a strange sound, like wine chimes made of bone, all tinkling at once. I pulled out my flashlight and stepped into the darkness, following the path that something had drawn on my wall. Following it to whatever waited for me inside. The cave was cold and wet. My flashlight beam showed a narrow tunnel leading down, with walls that looked like they'd been carved by water over thousands of years. The sound grew louder as I moved, deeper, that eerie tinkling, like thousands of tiny wind chimes. Water dripped from the ceiling, making puddles on the stone floor. I had to move carefully to avoid slipping. My leg ached with each step down the sloping path, but I kept going. I had to find out what happened to Duke, to the missing hikers, to understand what this thing was. After about 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a larger space. My light couldn't reach the far walls or ceiling, but it showed me enough to make my blood run cold. Hanging from the ceiling were thousands of small, dried objects, all swaying gently in the air currents from the tunnel. They clinked together, creating that wind chime sound. I forced myself to look closer, to shine my light directly on them. Vocal cords, thousands of them. Some looked ancient and withered, others fresher. They hung like some twisted version of decorations, gently swinging and colliding, creating whispers and half-formed sounds. Below them, arranged in a circle, were personal items, watches, rings, wallets, photos. I recognized Brian's camera, the hiking boots the woman had been wearing, a baseball cap from the third missing hiker, and in the center of the circle, Duke's collar. Not just the tags this time, but the whole collar, torn and bloody. "Duke," I whispered, and the name seemed to echo through the cavern, picked up by the hanging vocal cords until it sounded like a dozen voices were calling for my dog. I moved toward the circle, my gun drawn, Scanning the darkness beyond my flashlight beam, something moved in the shadows to my right. I spun, aiming my light and gun together. Nothing. Movement to my left now. I turned again, still nothing. Then, directly behind me, a soft sound, like someone right at my ear, letting out a long, slow breath. I whirled around and saw it, fully for the first time. It was tall, at least 8 feet, with limbs that seemed too long and too thin for its body. Its skin looked exactly like birch bark, with patches of darker color that helped it blend into the cave walls. It had no face, just that vertical slit where a face should be. As I watched, frozen in place, the slit opened, wider, revealing those teeth, hundreds of them like needles all the way down its throat, body. I couldn't tell where its head ended and body began. "Martin!" My wife's voice came from that opening, perfect in every detail. "I've been waiting for you." I raised my gun and fired. The shot was deafening in the cave, the flash momentarily blinding me. When my vision cleared, the creature was gone. I backed up, trying to keep my eyes on every shadow at once. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the gun. Movement above me. I looked up just in time to see it crawling across the ceiling like a spider, moving fast. Its limbs stretched and contracted, carrying it forward in a way that made my stomach turn. I fired again, missed. It disappeared into a dark corner of the cave. "Duke!" I called out, hoping against hope that my dog was still alive somewhere in this nightmare. "Duke, where are you, boy?" In answer, I heard a faint whimpering from a tunnel leading deeper into the cave system. Without thinking, I ran toward the sound, away from the hanging vocal cords and the circle of trophies. The tunnel narrowed as I went, forcing me to crouch and eventually crawl. The whimpering grew louder. I was sure it was Duke now. I knew his sounds, had heard him having nightmares often enough. The tunnel opened into a smaller cave. My flashlight showed me Duke, lying on his side, breathing fast. Blood matted the fur on his neck. "Duke," I said softly, moving toward him slowly. "It's me, boy, I'm here." His eyes opened, brown eyes, warm and familiar, not empty like they had been before. He tried to get up but couldn't. I reached him and gently ran my hand over his head. He licked my wrist weakly. "I'm going to get you out of here," I promised, though I had no idea how I would carry a German shepherd through that narrow tunnel while still being able to defend us. A sound behind me, stone scraping on stone. I turned, raising my gun again. The creature stood in the tunnel entrance, blocking our only way out. Its limbs filled the space, stretched to touch both walls, the floor, the ceiling. The slit on its face opened, and this time a different voice came out, a young man's voice I didn't recognize. "Please," it said, "please don't hurt me. I just want to go home." One of the missing hikers, then another voice, the older woman. "Help me! I can't breathe in here." Then Brian's voice. "It took my voice, man. It cut me open and took my voice." The slit closed, then opened again. This time Duke's voice came out, not barking, but actual words in a human voice that somehow still sounded like him. "Martin, it hurts." I'd had enough. I aimed at the center of that blank face and fired my last bullet. The creature jerked back, dark liquid oozing from a hole where I'd hit it. Not blood, something thicker, more like tree sap. It made a sound I'll never forget, a high, thin scream that seemed to come from dozens of throats at once. Then it was gone, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move, disappearing back into the tunnel. I turned to Duke, ready to try to carry him out somehow. But he was different now. His fur was falling out in patches, revealing skin beneath that looked wrong, like birch bark. Not Duke at all, a trap. I backed away as the thing that looked like Duke stood up, its form changing, stretching upward until it was as tall as the creature I'd just shot. Its face split open in that same vertical line, revealing the same needle teeth. "Martin," it said in Margaret's voice, "don't you want to stay with me forever?" I ran. There was another tunnel on the far side of the small cave, and I took it without thinking, moving purely on instinct now. This tunnel went up, climbing steeply. Water ran down its center, making the footing treacherous. Behind me, I could hear the creature coming, moving faster than I could with my bad leg. I pulled out one of my homemade torches and the matches, frantically trying to light it as I ran. The match caught. The torch flared to life, and I turned to face what was coming. The creature was just a few feet away, its limbs stretched to fill the tunnel, moving like a nightmare spider. When it saw the fire, it hesitated. The flames reflected in the shiny black teeth, visible through its facial slit. I thrust the torch toward it. The creature hissed and backed up a step. It was afraid of fire. The old woman had been right. I kept the torch between us as I continued up the tunnel, moving backward, keeping my eyes on the creature. It followed, keeping just outside the circle of firelight, that blank face always watching me. The tunnel kept climbing. My lungs burned from the effort, and my leg threatened to give out with each step. How far down had I gone? Would I ever find my way out? Then I smelled fresh air. The tunnel was leading back to the surface. Hope gave me a new burst of strength, and I moved faster, still keeping the torch between me and the creature. The tunnel ended at a small opening partially blocked by tree roots. Daylight filtered through the gaps. I was nearly there. I squeezed through the opening, tearing my clothes and skin on the roots, but not caring. I emerged into the forest about a quarter-mile from the falls. I could hear its roar in the distance. Looked back at the hole I'd come through, expecting to see the creature following. Nothing came out. Had it given up? No. There was movement in the trees to my right. The creature had found another way out. It moved from tree to tree, its bark-like skin making it almost invisible until it moved. I was out of bullets. The torch was my only weapon now, and it wouldn't last much longer. I needed to find my way back to the cabin, to get more supplies. Looking around, I spotted a familiar trail marker. I knew where I was now. The cabin was a mile east. I started running, my bad legs screaming in protest. The torch still clutched in my hand. Behind me, moving through the trees, I knew the creature followed, hunting me, calling my name in the voices of everyone I'd ever loved. I ran through the forest, stumbling over roots and rocks. My bad leg felt like it was on fire, but the fear pushing me forward was stronger than the pain. The torch in my hand was burning low, the flames getting smaller with each passing minute. Behind me, I could hear it moving through the trees, not running, but keeping pace, its long limbs carrying it effortlessly over the rough ground. Sometimes I caught glimpses of it from the corner of my eye, that birch bark skin blending with the trees, those impossibly long arms reaching out. "Martin," it called, using Margaret's voice again. "Why are you running from me? Don't you love me anymore?" I tried to block out the voice, to focus on the path ahead. The cabin was close now. I could see the clearing through the trees. My foot caught on a hidden root and I went down hard, landing on my wounded leg. Pain shot up to my hip like electricity. The torch flew from my hand, landing in a puddle where it went out with a hiss. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe through the pain. I rolled onto my back, looking up at the trees swaying against the grey sky. The creature stepped into view above me. Its head tilted to one side, that vertical slit closed. Then it began to change. The bark-like skin smoothing out, color washing. Over it, limbs shrinking to normal human size. Margaret stood over me, not a monster pretending to be her, but her, every detail perfect, from the small scar on her chin to the way her left eye was slightly greener than her right. "Martin," she said, kneeling beside me, "I've missed you so much." Her hand, warm and soft and so achingly familiar, touched my cheek. I wanted to believe it was her. God help me, I wanted to. "You're not real," I whispered. Her face, Margaret's face, showed sadness. "I'm as real as you need me to be." She leaned closer. "Stay with me, Martin. We can be together forever." The slit appeared then, a thin black line running down the center of her face, splitting it in two. It began to open, revealing those needle teeth. I rolled away, ignoring the pain in my leg, and pushed myself up. The cabin was just 30 yards away. I half ran, half limped toward it, not looking back. I made it to the porch, fumbled with the key and practically fell inside. Slamming the door behind me, I grabbed a chair and wedged it under the knob. Through the window, I saw the creature. At the edge of the clearing, back in its true form, tall and thin with that bark-like skin. It moved to one of the trees, pressed its body against it, and seemed to melt into the trunk. The tree shuddered, its branches swaying though there was no wind. I had a few minutes, maybe. It was playing with me now, enjoying the hunt. I went to the shelf where I kept emergency supplies and grabbed a bottle of lamp oil. Then I took sheets from the bed and began tearing them into strips, working quickly, my hands shaking. A sound at the window made me look up. Margaret's face was pressed against the glass, her eyes sad and pleading. "Please let me in, Martin. I'm cold out here." I ignored it, continuing my work. I soaked the cloth strips in oil, then took the iron fireplace poker and wrapped them around it tightly. A different face at the window now, Duke, whimpering, scratching at the glass. "Not real," I told myself. "Not real." I found the old book the Park Service had given me when I started, a history of Olympic National Park. I flipped through it frantically, looking for anything about the Russian loggers, about the thing they had brought with them there, a small paragraph about a cave-in near Granite Falls in 1891. 3 Russian loggers had died. Their bodies were never recovered, but a journal was found near the cave entrance. The journal was in the park's historical archives I'd never seen, but that would be in the main administration building 40 miles away past a landslide-blocked road. Something heavy hit the door, making the chair legs screech against the floor. Another hit and the wood began to crack. I didn't have time to get to those archives. I had to work with what I knew, what I'd seen. The creature feared fire. It seemed to collect voices, using them to lure new victims. It hunted in cycles every 33 years. The door shuddered under another blow. The chair was barely holding now. I gathered my makeshift weapons, the oil-soaked torch, matches, the poker. In my pocket was my father's hunting knife and Margaret's silver flask. Not much to fight a monster with, but it was all I had. The window shattered inward, showering the floor with glass. A long, thin arm with birch bark skin reached through, feeling around blindly. I moved to the back door and slipped outside. Instead of running into the forest, I circled around to the shed behind the cabin where we kept maintenance supplies. Inside, on a high shelf, was what I was looking for. A box marked "Danger Explosives." Dynamite used for clearing fallen trees and rocks. I grabbed 3 sticks and the detonator, then headed back toward the waterfall. I could hear the creature crashing around inside my cabin looking for me. It wouldn't take long to realize I was gone. I moved as fast as my injured leg would allow, taking a different path than before, one that led to the top of the cliff above the falls. My plan was desperate, probably suicidal, but it was all I could think of. Those Russian loggers had died in a cave-in. Maybe that was no accident. Maybe they had tried to seal the creature inside. I reached the top of the falls as the sky began to darken with evening. Looking down, I could see the cave entrance behind the curtain of water. If I could set the dynamite inside, in that chamber with all the vocal cords, maybe I could collapse it entirely. Movement in the trees behind me. The creature had figured out I wasn't in the cabin. It was coming. I began my descent down the treacherous path to the cave, moving as quickly as I dared. Halfway down, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. Duke's bark, coming from above me. I looked up. The real Duke, my Duke, was standing at the top of the cliff, barking frantically. Not at me, but at something beside him that I couldn't see. "Duke!" I called. "Stay!" he barked again, then yelped as something yanked him backward out of sight. "No!" I started to climb back up, then stopped. This could be another trick. The creature had pretended to be Duke before. But what if it was really him this time? I stood frozen on the narrow path, torn between continuing down to the cave with my plan or going back up to save my dog, if it really was my dog. A howl from above made the decision for me. That was Duke's pain sound. I'd heard it when he stepped on broken glass once, a sound no creature could imitate perfectly. I climbed back up, my leg protesting every step. When I reached the top, I found Duke lying on his side, blood on his neck, just like in the cave. But this time, when he saw me, he tried to stand, wagging his tail weakly. The creature was nowhere to be seen, but I could feel it watching from the trees. I knelt beside Duke and checked his wound. It was bad, a clean cut across his throat, but not deep enough to hit anything vital. The creature had started to take his voice, but had been interrupted somehow. "Good boy," I whispered, tearing a strip from my shirt to wrap around his neck. "You're a good boy, Duke. I couldn't leave him here, couldn't carry him down to the cave, couldn't go through with my plan. I was trapped, just like the creature wanted me to be. Then I saw it emerging from the trees. Not hiding anymore, not trying to trick me, just standing there, tall and thin, watching me with that blank face. The slit opened, and this time, dozens of voices came out all at once, a chorus of terror and pain, begging for help, screaming, crying. Among them, I heard Margaret, my father, the missing hikers, and other voices I didn't recognize. I stood up, placing myself between the creature and Duke. I pulled out my homemade torch and the matches. "You want my voice?" I asked, striking a match and lighting the oil-soaked cloth. It caught quickly, blazing bright in the growing darkness. "Come and take it." The creature paused, seeming to consider. Then it moved toward me, its limbs stretching, reaching out like a spider, closing in on its prey. I held the torch in front of me with one hand. With the other, I pulled out the dynamite and the detonator. "You know what this is?" I asked, holding them up. "It's going to end you, just like those Russians tried to do in 1891. The creature stopped. The voices from its mouth slit went silent. Then, slowly, it began to back away, moving toward the cliff edge. It knew. It understood. And it was afraid. I followed, keeping the torch between us, forcing it closer to the edge. Duke whimpered behind me, but I couldn't look back. The creature's arms stretched out to the sides, trying to circle around me, but I waved the torch and it pulled back. We reached the edge of the cliff, the roar of the falls loud beneath us. The creature had nowhere to go now except down, or through me. It chose through me. It lunged forward faster than I could react, one long arm knocking the torch from my hand, sending it spinning over the cliff edge. Another arm wrapped around my throat, lifting me off the ground. I couldn't breathe. The creature pulled me closer, the slit in its face opening wide. I saw those needle teeth, hundreds of them, moving like they had a life of their own. With my last bit of strength, I pulled my father's hunting knife from my belt and plunged it into the creature's chest. It made that terrible screaming sound again, dozens of voices all screaming at once. The arm around my throat loosened, and I fell to the ground, gasping for air. The creature staggered back, dark sap oozing from the wound where my knife stuck out. It reached the cliff edge, arms windmilling as it tried to keep its balance. I grabbed the dynamite from where I dropped it, jammed the detonator in, and with all my might, threw it at the creature. The dynamite hit the creature in the chest, just as it lost its balance. Together, they fell over the edge, disappearing into the mist of the falls. I crawled to the edge and looked down. I couldn't see anything through the thick mist, but I knew where they had gone, into the cave behind the waterfall. Into that chamber of voices. I pulled the detonator trigger from my pocket and closed my eyes. "I'm sorry, Margaret," I whispered. "I let you die alone. I won't make that mistake again." I pressed the button. The explosion was deafening. The cliff under me shuddered and began to crack. Rocks and dirt slid toward the edge as the whole face of the cliff started to collapse. I tried to scramble back, but my injured leg gave out. The ground beneath me crumbled, and I felt myself falling down into the cloud of dust and mist, down toward the churning water and rocks below. The last thing I remember is Duke's bark from somewhere far above, growing fainter as I fell. I woke up. In darkness, my body broken. Pain was everywhere. My leg, my ribs, my head. I couldn't move. Something heavy was on top of me, pinning me down. It took a moment to realize I was buried under rocks, somewhere in the collapsed cave. Water dripped nearby. The air was damp and cool. I tried to call for help, but my voice was just a raspy whisper. My throat felt wrong, like something was missing. I don't know how long I lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness. Hours, days. The pain would fade, then come roaring back. Thirst became a torture all its own. In my clearer moments, I listened for any sound of the creature. Had the explosion killed it, or was it still there, waiting in the darkness? Sometimes I thought I heard whispers, that terrible chorus of stolen voices. But it may have been the water or my mind slipping away. Then came a new sound, scratching, digging. Something was trying to get to me. Hello. I tried to call, but my voice wouldn't work right. Just a hoarse whisper. The digging grew louder. Light suddenly broke through, blinding me after so long in darkness. A hole appeared in the rocks above me, and through it I saw a familiar shape. Duke. His dirty, bloody face appeared in the opening, and he barked when he saw me, a sound of pure joy. Then he disappeared, and I heard more barking, this time farther, away. He was getting help. The next few hours were a blur. Men in park service uniforms clearing away rocks, the pain of being moved, a helicopter ride, hospital lights, doctors with worried faces. I learned later that Duke had led a search party. To me, after 3 weeks of being missing, most people had given up hope of finding me alive. But Duke hadn't given up. He'd stayed on the mountain, barking at anyone who came close to the collapsed cliff face, trying to tell them where to look. The official report called it a tragic accident. A ranger caught in a landslide while investigating reports of missing hikers. Nothing about a creature that stole voices. Nothing about a cave full of vocal cords. Nothing about a monster from Russian folklore. When I tried to tell them, they gave me sympathetic looks and talked about trauma, oxygen deprivation, hallucinations. I stopped trying after a while. They found the missing hikers, what was left of them, in the debris from the cave-in. The case was closed. Everyone was satisfied with the explanation except me. My throat never healed right. The doctors said my vocal cords were damaged in the accident. They couldn't explain the precise surgical nature of the injury, a clean cut like something had been removed. They called it a medical mystery. I speak in a whisper now, when I speak at all. Duke doesn't seem to mind. He follows me everywhere, never leaving my side for more than a few minutes. I never returned to ranger duty. After I got out of the hospital, we moved to a small town in eastern Washington, far from the mountains, far from the forests, far from the mist. I found work as a fire watcher in the summers. Just me and Duke in a tower, watching the horizon for smoke. No people to explain my scars or my whisper to. No one to tell my story to. But sometimes, on cold autumn nights when the fog rolls in, I think I hear Margaret's voice calling from the darkness. And Duke will stand at the window, hackles raised, a low growl in his throat. I keep a torch by my bed, just in case. I keep matches in my pocket at all times. I never answer when I hear my name called in the dark, and every year I check the missing persons reports for Olympic National Park, holding my breath until November passes. So far, there have been no clusters of disappearances, no reports of whispers in the forest. But it's only been 2 years, and the thing in the forest operated. On a 33-year cycle, what if the dynamite didn't kill it? What if it's just injured, sleeping, healing? What if 31 years from now it wakes up hungry again? I try not to think about it, but Duke knows. I see it in the way he watches the fog, the way he stands guard at night. He remembers too. The Park Service quietly closed the trails around. Granite Falls. Environmental restoration, they called it on the signs. But the rangers who work at Olympic have a rule now. Never answer if you hear your name called when you're alone in the forest. They don't know why. It's just something they're told on their first day, a story passed down, a warning whispered. And sometimes hikers who camp too close to where Granite Falls used to be, the waterfall dried up after the cave-in, report a strange experience. A man's voice with a military crispness to it, whispering from the mist. Go. Back, the voice says. It's not safe here. They say if you follow the voice, you'll find yourself turned around heading back toward the main trails, toward safety, away from what sleeps in the dark beneath the collapsed cliff. As for me, I'll keep watching and waiting. 31 more years. Then I'll go back to Granite Falls with fire and iron and whatever else I can find, because I left something in that cave. Something was taken from me. And a part of me, the soldier, the ranger, the man who couldn't save Margaret or those hikers, needs to make sure it never happens again. That's my voice you hear in the forest. What's left of it. I'm still there, still standing guard, still whispering warnings from the mist. My name is Daniel Whitefeather. I'm a park ranger here at Glacier National Park in Montana. I've worked in these mountains for almost 9 years now, but this winter was different. I specialize in studying the animals that live at high altitudes, the mountain goats, wolverines, and other creatures that somehow survive in places where most humans would freeze to death in hours. As a member of the Blackfeet Nation, these mountains are part of my ancestral homeland. My people have stories about these peaks going back countless generations. Winter in Glacier is no joke. The temperatures regularly drop below 20 degrees, and daylight only lasts for a few hours. Most tourists are long gone by this time of year, leaving just us rangers and researchers to watch over this frozen wilderness. I was leading a small team studying how climate change is affecting the park. The glaciers are melting faster every year. It's why I became a wildlife biologist in the first place, to understand what's happening to this land I love. This particular winter started normally enough, but then strange things began happening. The snow didn't fall like it should. Sometimes I swear I saw flakes floating upward instead of down. Ice formed in shapes that seemed to defy gravity, clinging to cliff faces at impossible angles. When you spend enough time in the wilderness, you develop a sense for when something isn't right. The animals feel it first. The ravens stopped their usual patrols. The wolf packs moved away from certain valleys they'd hunted in for generations. Even the insects that normally survive under the snow seemed to have vanished from some areas. And then there was the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a snow-covered forest, but a total absence of sound that pressed against your ears until they hurt. It happened during snowfalls, when the world should have had at least some ambient noise. Instead, there was nothing. Like the air itself was holding its breath. I remember standing on a ridge one evening as the light faded, looking out over an endless sea of white. The snow stretched in every direction, with no features to orient yourself by. If you stared too long, you'd start to lose your sense of up and down, like you were floating in space rather than standing on solid ground. That's when I first felt it, the sensation of being watched, not by anything human, not by any animal. I knew, but by something that was part of the cold itself, something that had been sleeping in the ice for a very long time, and now it was waking up. I wasn't always a ranger. Before this job, I was an Olympic biathlete. That's a sport where you cross-country ski and shoot rifles at targets. Growing up on the reservation, my grandfather taught me to track animals and move silently through snow. Those skills served me well in competition, and now they keep me alive in these mountains. My face carries the reminder of why you must respect winter. 3 years ago, during a rescue mission for lost hikers, I got caught in a sudden storm. The frostbite left scars across my left cheek and jaw. I was lucky. Others have lost far more to the cold. I carry 2 important items with me always. First is my grandfather's hunting knife, its bone handle worn smooth by generations of hands. Second is a small leather pouch filled with sacred herbs, sweetgrass, sage, and cedar. My grandfather gave it to me for protection. I used to keep it just to honor him, but lately I've found myself touching it for comfort. "Daniel, come look." "At this," called a voice that pulled me from my thoughts. That was Dr. Eliza Montgomery, the glaciologist working with my team. She was smart, maybe too smart for her own good. She'd been studying the ice formations in the park for months and had started finding things she couldn't explain. "What is it?" I asked, trudging through knee-deep snow to where she knelt beside a glacier's edge. She pointed to an ice core sample she'd just pulled. Even I could see something was wrong. The ice crystals formed perfect geometric patterns that looked almost manufactured. "This isn't natural," she said. "Ice doesn't form like this." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Maybe we should head back to base," I suggested. The sun was already sinking, and darkness comes fast in winter. "Just a few more samples," Eliza insisted. She always pushed the limits, staying out later than was safe. Science was her religion, and she treated the mountains like they were just another laboratory. I checked my watch and sighed. 30 minutes, then we go. No arguments. As Eliza drilled another core sample, I scanned our surroundings. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something felt off. That's when I noticed the tracks. They were my own boot prints from earlier, but they came from a direction I hadn't been. I followed them with my eyes, seeing how they led straight to where I now stood. But I had approached from the opposite side. "Eliza," I said quietly, "pack up. We're leaving now." She must have heard something in my voice because she didn't argue. As we hurried back to our snowmobiles, the day's last light created long shadows across the snow. For a second, I thought, I saw our shadows move independently of us, like they were trying to separate from our bodies. That night at base camp, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those tracks, about the ice crystals, about the silence that seemed to follow us. Something was watching us in the white wilderness, and I was becoming less certain it was something I could explain with science. The next morning, I gathered our research team in the main cabin. Besides me and Eliza, we had 4 others: Mike and Sarah, 2 graduate students helping with fieldwork, Dr. Peterson, an older climate scientist, and Jade, our communications specialist who kept us connected to the outside world. We're here to study how climate change is affecting the park's ecosystem, I reminded everyone as they sipped their coffee. But we need to be extra careful. The weather patterns this winter are unusual. Eliza pulled out her laptop and showed everyone the strange ice samples we'd collected. These formations shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about glacial ice, she explained. Dr. Peterson adjusted his glasses. Could be contamination from something. Old military. Waste, perhaps. There used to be testing sites near the eastern border. I hadn't thought of that. After the Cold War ended, the park reclaimed land that had been used by the military. Who knows what they left behind? Maybe, I said, but that doesn't explain the animal behavior. I spread out a map on the table and pointed to areas I'd marked, with red X's. These are locations where I've found dead wildlife in the past 2 weeks, mostly smaller animals, foxes, hares, even a few birds. That's not unusual in winter, Mike pointed out. Animals die in the cold all the time. Not like this, I said quietly. They weren't curled up like animals that froze to death. They were posed like they were running or fighting off something. Their faces looked... I hesitated, not wanting to sound dramatic. They looked scared. Sarah hugged herself. That's creepy. It's just nature, Eliza said firmly. Everything has a scientific explanation. I nodded, but wasn't so sure. Science couldn't explain the boot prints I'd seen yesterday, or why I kept waking up feeling like someone had been standing over my bed. Today we split into teams, I said. Eliza and I will check the eastern glacier. Mike and Sarah, you monitor wildlife activity near the lake. Dr. Peterson and Jade will stay here and analyze our samples. As we prepared to head out, Jade called us over to the radio. Storm warning just came in. Big system moving our way in about 3 days. How big? I asked. They're calling it the worst in a decade. Once it hits, we might be stuck here for weeks. I looked around at the team. We have supplies for a month. We'll be fine as long as we're careful. But as I said it, I felt that same chill I'd been feeling more and more lately. The sense that we were being watched, that something was waiting. Outside, the sky was clear blue, but in the distance I could see clouds gathering over the mountains. They seemed to move against the wind, forming shapes that almost looked like reaching hands. Let's go, I told Eliza. I want to be back before dark. As we loaded our gear onto the snowmobiles, I touched the medicine pouch at my belt. For the first time in my life, I silently recited the protection prayer my grandfather had taught me. I had a feeling we were going to need all the help we could get. Eliza and I reached the eastern glacier around noon. The sun hung low in the sky, barely warming the bitter air. Our breath formed thick clouds with each exhale as we set up our equipment. I want to check something, I said, pointing to a narrow crevasse that cut through the ice like a blue wound. I noticed strange formations down there last week. Eliza nodded, already distracted by her ice core samples. I secured a rope to a sturdy ice anchor and began to lower myself into the crevasse. The walls around me glowed an eerie blue, growing darker as I descended. About 30 feet down, I saw it, exactly what had bothered me before, but worse now. The ice had formed perfect geometric patterns, hexagons and triangles that connected like a massive honeycomb. No natural process could create such precise shapes, but what really made my blood run cold was the discovery wedged within the ice. Wall. A fox, perfectly preserved, its body contorted in a position of pure terror. Its mouth was open in a silent scream, claws extended as if fighting off an attacker. Most disturbing was its eyes, wide open and somehow still holding an expression of horror. Eliza, I called up, you need to see this. She descended quickly, her headlamp beam dancing across the ice walls. When she saw the fox, she immediately pulled out her camera. Fascinating, she whispered, not sounding scared at all. The ice has preserved it perfectly, but look at how it's positioned, like it was flash frozen in an instant. That's not possible, I said. Even in these temperatures, freezing takes time. Eliza moved closer to the ice wall, running her gloved hand over the surface. The temperature would need to drop at least 50 degrees in seconds to cause this. As she touched the ice near the fox, I noticed something else. Eliza, look. I pointed my light at the ice above the animal. There, embedded in the clear ice, was a perfect handprint. Not a human hand. The fingers were too long, too thin, with what looked like extra joints. It was pressed against the ice from the inside, as if something had been trapped within the glacier. Eliza stared at it, then laughed nervously. Probably just an unusual air pocket or mineral deposit. Ice can create strange illusions. I wasn't convinced. Let's get some samples and go back up. As Eliza chipped away at the ice, I glanced down deeper into the crevasse. For a split second, I thought I saw movement in the darkness below, something pale and swift, disappearing into the blue depths. Back on the surface, we found something even stranger. In the fresh snow that had fallen while we were in the crevasse, perfect geometric. Patterns had appeared, identical to those in the ice below. They formed an intricate design about 20 feet wide. Could someone have made these? Eliza asked, the scientific certainty in her voice wavering for the first time. I scanned the pristine snow around us. There are no footprints, no tracks, of any kind. We both stood silently, the implications sinking in. Whatever had created those patterns had done so without disturbing the snow around them, as if they had formed from within the snow itself. The wind picked up suddenly, blowing, ice crystals that stung my exposed skin. But something was wrong with the sound it made. Instead of the usual howl, it seemed to carry whispers, words just below the threshold of understanding. We should head back, I said, looking at the darkening sky. Now. As we packed our gear, the temperature plummeted. My equipment thermometer showed a drop of 20 degrees in minutes. Impossible. While securing the last of our samples, I noticed something that made my hands shake. A set of footprints leading away from our sight, my own distinctive boot print with the crack across the left heel. But I hadn't walked in that direction all day. Said nothing to Eliza. She was a scientist to her core. She wouldn't believe me if I told her what I was beginning to suspect, that something in these mountains was mimicking us, studying us, hunting us. The storm arrived sooner than predicted. By the time we got back to base camp, heavy snow was already falling, and the wind howled like a wounded animal. Radio's not working, Jade told us, as we stomped snow from our boots in the entryway. I can't reach the main station. Dr. Peterson looked up from his microscope. Cell service is down too. The storm must have knocked out the towers. It'll pass, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We've got enough supplies. That night, the temperature dropped to 30 below zero. The wind battered our cabin with such force that the walls creaked and groaned. None of us slept well. I woke suddenly at 3 a.m., not sure what had disturbed me. The cabin was dark, except for the faint red glow of the heater. Everyone else was asleep in their bunks. But something felt wrong. I slipped out of bed and pulled on my boots, careful not to wake the others. Moving to the window, I wiped away the frost and peered into the darkness. The storm had paused. Moonlight reflected off the snow, making the world outside glow with a pale blue light. And there, standing in the clearing about 50 yards from our cabin, was a figure. At first, I thought it might be one of our team who had gone outside, but a quick glance confirmed everyone was still in their bunks. The figure stood perfectly still, facing our cabin. It was shaped like a person, but something about its proportions was wrong. Too tall, too thin. I blinked, and it was gone. Had I imagined it? Then the radio crackled to life, making me jump. Through the static came a voice, faint but clear enough. To understand, base camp to Eastern Survey Team. Come in, Eastern Survey Team, do you copy? This is Ranger Walker, October 12th, 1987. My blood ran cold. That date was more than 30 years ago. I rushed to the radio, but before I could touch it, it went silent again. When I tried to turn it on, nothing happened. Dead, just like Jade had said. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen or heard. Not yet. But I couldn't fall back asleep. The next day, things got worse. Mike and Sarah returned from checking their wildlife monitoring stations. Their faces, all our cameras are showing the same thing, Sarah said, connecting her laptop. But it doesn't make sense. She pulled up the video. It showed our research area at night, the infrared camera creating a greenish image. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the temperature reading at the bottom of the screen began to drop rapidly from 0 to -50 in seconds. The snow in the camera's view began to move, not blowing in the wind, but rising upward, gathering into a vaguely human shape. The shape stood there for a moment before the camera suddenly cut to static. This happened at every station, Mike said quietly, and all at exactly 3:15 a.m. I thought about the figure I'd seen standing outside our cabin. Dr. Peterson cleared his throat. Equipment malfunction. The extreme cold is affecting the electronics. All. 6 cameras had the exact same malfunction? Sarah asked. At the exact same time? Before anyone could answer, we heard Eliza scream from the lab area. We rushed in to find her backing away from the ice samples we'd collected. Look, she whispered, pointing at one of the clear containers. The ice sample was moving, not melting. It was still well below freezing in the lab, but the crystals were rearranging themselves, forming new patterns before our eyes. As we watched, they took the shape of a tiny, perfect handprint pressed against the container glass. That's not possible, Dr. Peterson muttered, but his scientific certainty sounded hollow. That afternoon, the storm returned with even greater fury. Jade tried the radio again with no luck. We were completely cut off. We need to conserve fuel. I told everyone. The storm could last longer than expected. As darkness fell, we gathered in the main room. No one wanted to be alone. We played cards and tried to keep our spirits up, but the mood was tense. Every creak of the cabin, every howl of the wind made us jump. Around midnight, the lights flickered, then went out. Our backup generator kicked in, but the darkness had lasted just long enough for us all to see it. Outside every window, pressed against the glass, were handprints in the frost. Dozens of them, too elongated to be human, appearing and disappearing as if whatever made them was trying to find a way in. No one slept that night. We took turns watching, keeping the fires burning high. By morning, the handprints were gone, erased by fresh frost. If not for the fear still tight in my chest, I might have convinced myself we'd imagined the whole thing. But as I made coffee in the kitchen, I noticed something that made my hands shake so badly I dropped the mug. On the inside of the window, where no frost should be, was a single handprint, as if something had pressed its hand against the glass from within our cabin. We need to talk, I told Eliza, pulling her aside while the others ate breakfast. Something's happening here that goes beyond weird weather or equipment malfunctions. She looked at me with tired eyes. None of us had slept well in days. What are you thinking, Daniel? I hesitated, knowing how it would sound. My grandfather used to tell stories about these mountains, about something he called the Wapi-Wipi-Yi, the White Memory Keepers. Beings that lived in the ice and preserved memories? Eliza frowned. You can't seriously believe. I don't know what to believe anymore. I cut her off. But I know what I'm seeing, and it doesn't match anything in my scientific training. Before she could respond, Sarah burst into the room, panic on her face. Mike's gone, she said, her voice shaking. I woke up and he wasn't in his bunk. His coat and boots are still here. We searched the entire cabin, then geared up to check outside. The storm had eased slightly, but the cold was brutal, 40 below with the wind chill. No one could survive long without proper clothing. He couldn't have gone far, Dr. Peterson said as we stepped into the blinding white. We split up to search around the cabin, staying within shouting distance. I headed toward the equipment shed, following a set of barefoot prints in the fresh snow. Barefoot, in this cold, the prints led me around the back of the shed, then suddenly stopped at a blank wall of snow. It was as if Mike had walked to this spot and then disappeared. That's when I heard it, a faint tapping from inside the shed. I yanked open the door, half expecting to find Mike. Instead, I found something that turned my blood to ice. In the center of the shed stood what looked like a person, made entirely of ice crystals. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with a body that seemed to be constantly shifting and reforming, like snow blown by wind. Where its face should have been was a smooth, reflective surface that cast back a distorted version of my own shocked expression. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The creature tilted its head, studying me with that featureless face. The air around it was so cold it hurt to breathe. Then it raised one long, slender arm and pointed at me. From its fingertip, ice crystals stretched outward, forming a bridge between us. As they neared my chest, I felt a pulling sensation, not on my body, but deeper, as if something was being drawn out of me. The medicine pouch at my belt suddenly felt warm. I clutched it instinctively, and the creature withdrew its arm, the ice bridge shattering. I backed toward the door, unable to look away. As I reached the threshold, the creature dissolved into a flurry of snowflakes that swirled around the shed before settling back to the floor. I ran back to the others, my mind racing. When I reached them, I could tell from their faces that they had found something too. "Mike," Sarah whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. They led me to a snowbank about 100 yards from the cabin. There, half buried in snow, was Mike, or what was left of him. His body was frozen solid, his face locked in an expression of terror. But the most disturbing part was his skin. It had a crystalline quality, as if he was turning to ice from the inside out. "We need to get back inside," I said, the image of the ice creature still fresh in my mind. "Now." As we carried Mike's body back to the cabin, I noticed Eliza lagging behind, staring at something in the distance. When I called to her, she snapped her attention back and hurried to catch up. Back inside, Dr. Peterson examined Mike's body while Jade tried again to reach anyone on the radio. "This isn't normal freezing," Dr. Peterson muttered. "The cellular structure is completely altered. It's as if the water in his cells form perfect ice crystals simultaneously." "Like flash freezing," I said, remembering the fox in the glacier. "Impossible without specialized equipment," he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled Eliza aside again. "I saw something out there, something not human." Instead of the skepticism I expected, her eyes lit up with an unsettling enthusiasm. "The crystalline entities? You saw one too?" Her words hit me like a punch. "Two? You've seen them before? Why didn't you say anything?" She lowered her voice. "I've been tracking them for months. They're incredible, Daniel. They're not just living creatures. They're archives. They preserve memories in ice. Everything they touch becomes a perfect record of that moment." I stared at her, horror dawning. "You knew about them when we came here. This isn't about climate research for you at all, is it?" Her silence was answer enough. "Mike is dead," I hissed. "They killed him." Eliza shook her head. "They didn't kill him. They preserved him. There's a difference." I backed away from her, suddenly seeing a stranger where my colleague had been. "You led us here knowing these things were dangerous. They're only dangerous if you resist," she said calmly. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing her forearm. The skin there had the same crystalline quality as Mike's body, transparent enough that I could see the blue veins beneath, perfectly preserved like insects in amber. "They've been sharing their memories with me," she continued, a fevered light in her eyes. "I've seen things, Daniel. Ice ages coming and going, creatures that walked these mountains thousands of years ago. They're trying to preserve everything before it's all lost to warming." I felt sick. "How long have you been like this?" 3 weeks, she said. "It started with just my hand. It's spreading slowly. I can control it." A horrible thought occurred to me. The others who've disappeared in these mountains over the years, did they become like you? Or like Mike? Eliza's smile was chilling. "Some of each. It depends on whether they fight it or embrace it." In that moment, I knew we were in far more danger than I had imagined, not just from the creatures of ice, but from the woman standing before me who had already given herself to them. I had to warn the others about Eliza, but I needed proof. No one would believe me otherwise. "I need time to think," I told her, backing toward the door. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't do anything foolish, Daniel. They're just trying to save what matters before it's all gone." I rejoined the others in the main room, my mind racing. Sarah was still crying over Mike's body, which we'd covered with a sheet. Dr. Peterson was taking notes, his scientific mind still trying to make sense of the impossible. Jade sat by the radio, periodically trying different frequencies. "I need To check our emergency supplies, I announced. Jade, can you help me? Once we were alone in the storage room, I spoke quickly and quietly. Something's wrong with Eliza. She's working with whatever killed Mike. Jade's eyes widened. What are you talking about? She's been changed by them. Part of her arm is crystallized. She admits she's been communicating with these things for weeks. These things? What things? I took a deep breath. There are entities in the ice. My grandfather's people called them the White Memory Keepers. They're preserving memories by freezing them in time. Animals, people, everything. To my surprise, Jade nodded slowly. I heard something on the radio earlier. Didn't want to say because it sounded crazy. Voices from old ranger patrols from decades ago. Perfect recordings, like they were happening right now. A chill ran through me. They store memories in the ice somehow. Eliza says they're trying to preserve everything before climate change melts the glaciers. By killing us, Jade whispered. She doesn't see it as killing. She sees it as preservation. I rubbed my face, trying to think. We need to get out of here, contact the main station somehow. The snowmobiles, Jade suggested. If two of us went, a scream cut her off. Sarah's voice filled with terror. We rushed back to find the main room in chaos. The windows had shattered inward, letting in a blast of freezing air and swirling snow. But the snow wasn't falling naturally. It was forming shapes, human-like figures that moved with purpose. Dr. Peterson was backing away from one, his scientific curiosity finally broken by fear. Sarah was cornered by another, its crystalline arm reaching for her face. Eliza stood in the center of the room, arms raised as if in welcome. Parts of her face now had the same transparent quality as her arm, ice crystals forming around her eyes. Like a mask. It's time, she announced. They've come to help us join the archive. I had seconds to act. My grandfather had told me these beings feared two things, salt and fire. I grabbed a canister of road salt we kept for the walkways and flung a handful at the creature reaching for Sarah. The effect was immediate and shocking. The entity let out a high-pitched sound like ice cracking and seemed to melt partially where the salt touched it, losing its human shape. "The fire!" I shouted to Jade. "Stoke it up!" She understood instantly, grabbing kindling and throwing it into the wood stove. I pulled my medicine pouch from my belt, removed a pinch of the dried herbs, and threw them into the flames. The smoke that rose had a sweet, pungent smell. When it reached the ice creatures, they recoiled, their forms becoming unstable. "Stop!" Eliza cried, moving to block me. "You don't understand what you're destroying. I understand they killed Mike, and they'll kill all of us." I pushed past her, throwing more salt at the nearest entity. In the confusion, I saw Dr. Peterson make a break for the door. He was almost there when an ice creature materialized in front of him, plunging what looked like a crystalline hand into his chest. I watched, in horror, as frost spread across his body instantly, his mouth open in a silent scream. "We need to go now." I grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her toward the back door, Jade right behind us. We burst outside into blinding snow. The storm had returned full force, but that might work in our favor, hiding us from the ice entities. "The equipment shed," I shouted over the wind. "The snowmobiles are there." We stumbled through deep snow, the cold biting at any exposed skin. Behind us, the cabin was now surrounded by at least a dozen ice figures, their crystalline bodies glinting in the dim light. We reached the shed, and I yanked the door open. The snowmobiles were there, but covered in a thick layer of ice, too. Thick to have formed naturally in the short time since we'd last used them. "They knew we'd try to escape," Jade said, despair in her voice. "There's another way," I said, thinking fast. "The ice caves. My grandfather said they're the home of the White Memory Keepers. If we can reach the main cavern, maybe we can find a way to stop them." "Are you crazy?" Sarah cried. "You want to go to their home?" "They're already here," I pointed out, "and they've disabled our only way out. Our best chance is to understand what we're dealing with." Reluctantly, They agreed. We gathered what supplies we could from the shed, climbing gear, headlamps, my grandfather's hunting knife, and the remaining salt. The eastern glacier was 2 miles away through the storm. Normally an easy hike, but in these conditions with creatures hunting us, it might as well have been 100 miles. We set out, keeping close together. The wind howled around us, sometimes carrying whispers that sounded almost like words. Twice we stopped when we spotted ice figures in the distance, standing perfectly still as if listening for us. After what felt like hours, we reached the glacier. The entrance to the ice caves was a narrow crevasse that opened into a larger tunnel. As we prepared to descend, I heard something behind us. Liza stood there, more crystal than human now. Her eyes had become clear ice, reflecting light like mirrors. "I tried to help you understand," she said, her voice somehow carrying despite the howling wind. "They showed me everything. The memories of 10,000 years, preserved in perfect detail. They've been here since the last ice age, keeping safe all that would otherwise be lost." "They're killing people," I said. "That's not preservation, it's murder." "Such a human perspective," she sighed. "Death is only the end if the memory dies too. They ensure nothing is ever truly lost." Behind her, more ice figures emerged from the storm surrounding us. We were trapped between them and the crevasse. "Go," I told Jade and Sarah. "I'll hold them off." "You can't fight them all," Sarah protested. "I'm not going to fight. I'm going to talk." I turned to face Eliza and the entities. "My grandfather taught me the old ways to communicate with the spirits of this land. Maybe that works with these beings too." Jade and Sarah reluctantly began their descent into the crevasse. I stood my ground as Eliza and the ice creatures approached. "I understand why you're doing this," I called out. "You're trying to save what's being lost, but this isn't the way." Eliza tilted her head, ice crystals tinkling as she moved. "They've been collecting memories since before humans walked these mountains. Climate change is destroying their archives. They're desperate, Daniel. So you're helping them preserve people against their will, like Mike, like Dr. Peterson. Some sacrifices are necessary." An ice entity moved forward, extending its arm toward me. I felt that pulling sensation again, like something was being drawn from my very core. I clutched my medicine pouch and began to recite the words my grandfather had taught me, an ancient greeting to the spirits of the mountains. To my surprise, the entity paused. "They recognize the old language," Eliza said, seeming impressed. "Your connection to this land runs deep, deep enough to know that nothing should be taken without permission," I replied. "That's what your archivists don't understand." I slowly reached out my hand toward the nearest entity. It was a dangerous gamble, but I had to try something. "I'll share my memories willingly," I said, "but you must leave the others alone." The ice creature hesitated, then extended its crystalline hand to meet mine. The moment we touched, pain shot up my arm as frost spread across my skin. But something else happened too. Images flooded my mind. Glaciers advancing and retreating over centuries, mammoths walking through ancient valleys, indigenous people, my ancestors, making offerings to the ice. I saw the truth. These beings weren't malevolent, they were desperate. As the world warmed, their ice archives were melting, thousands of years of memories disappearing forever. But I also saw their mistake. In their panic to preserve, they had forgotten to ask. They had started taking by force what should only be given freely. Through gritted teeth, fighting the cold spreading up my arm, I pushed a memory of my own toward the entity, my grandfather, not teaching me that nothing taken without permission can truly be preserved. That force destroys the very thing they sought to save. The entity released me suddenly, recoiling. My hand was partially crystallized now, numb and glittering with ice crystals, but I could still move it. "What did you do?" Eliza demanded, her voice cracking like breaking ice. "I showed them another way," I gasped, cradling my injured hand. They don't need to take. People would share willingly if asked. The ice beings seemed to confer, their bodies shifting and flowing together like a snowstorm. Then, as one, they turned toward the crevasse where Sarah and Jade had disappeared. No, I shouted, lunging forward, but I wasn't fast enough. The entities flowed into the crevasse like an avalanche, disappearing into the depths of the ice caves. I had no choice but to follow. I scrambled down the rope into the crevasse, my crystallized hand aching with cold that went bone deep. The ice. Walls glowed an eerie blue, casting strange shadows as I descended. "Sarah, Jade!" I called out, my voice echoing in the frozen passage. No answer. Behind me, I heard Eliza following. Her movements were different now. Smoother, less human. More like the ice entities. "They won't hurt your friends if they don't resist," she called down. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Daniel." I ignored her, moving deeper into the ice caves. The passage widened into a large chamber where massive icicles hung from the ceiling like crystal teeth. The floor sloped downward, leading deeper into the glacier. As I moved forward, I noticed something strange about the ice walls. They weren't solid. They contained images, like frozen photographs embedded in the ice. I saw animals, trees, people from different times frozen in perfect detail. Some scenes I recognized from history books, explorers from centuries ago, their faces locked in expressions of wonder or fear. This was their archive, their memory library. I followed the slope downward, the passage twisting and turning. The temperature dropped with each step, far colder than should be possible. My breath no longer formed clouds. It froze instantly and fell as tiny ice crystals. Finally, the passage opened into an enormous cavern. The ceiling arched high above, sparkling with embedded crystals that gave off a soft, pulsing light. The floor was a smooth sheet of ice so clear I could see dozens of feet down into the glacier. And there, in the center of the cavern, were Sarah and Jade. They were on their knees, surrounded by at least 20 ice entities. The creatures had formed a circle around them, their crystalline arms extended. Ice was already creeping up my friend's legs, fixing them in place. "Stop!" I shouted, rushing forward. The entities turned toward me, their featureless faces reflecting. The light. One stepped forward, taller than the others, its form more defined, almost regal. "They won't listen to you," Eliza said, gliding into the cavern behind me. "They've been collecting memories this way for thousands of years, and they're dying because of it," I replied. "Look around you, Eliza. The glacier is melting. Their whole archive is disappearing. Exactly why they need to preserve what they can, while they can." Her voice had a strange, echoing quality now, as if multiple voices spoke through her. I turned to the tall entity. "I know you understand me. I showed you another way. Taking memories by force destroys what makes them valuable." The creature tilted its head, studying me with its blank face. Then it extended one long crystalline finger and touched the ice floor. Suddenly, the clear ice beneath our feet came alive with images. I saw glaciers retreating year by year, their blue edges giving way to rock and soil. I saw ancient memories stored in the ice melting away, lost forever. Thousands of years of history dissolving into water. "They're showing us what's at stake," Eliza said. "Everything they've preserved, everything they are, is disappearing. That doesn't give them the right to freeze people against their will." I insisted. The tall entity moved toward me, its form shifting like blowing snow. It reached for my crystallized hand, the one it had touched before. I hesitated, then extended my arm. The creature took my hand in its icy grip. Images flooded my mind again, but different this time. I saw my ancestors living in these mountains, making offerings to the ice. I saw them sharing their stories voluntarily, allowing the ice beings to preserve their knowledge, their songs, their history. "They used to ask," I said, understanding dawning. "Humans used to give memories willingly. Until they forgot, Eliza said. Until science replaced respect for the old ways. I pulled my hand back, turning to Sarah and Jade. Let them go. This isn't the way. The tall entity seemed to consider, then made a gesture. The ice creeping up my friend's legs stopped spreading, but didn't retreat. I'll make you a deal, I said to the entity. Let my friends go, and I'll stay. I'll share all my memories willingly. My knowledge of the park, of wildlife, of my people's traditions. I'll be your keeper of memories. Daniel, no, Sarah cried, the ice being considered for a long moment. Then it extended its hand toward me again. First, free my friends, I insisted. It made another gesture, and the ice around Sarah and Jade cracked and fell away. They stumbled to their feet. Go, I told them. Get back to the cabin. When the storm breaks, head for the main station. Tell them what happened here. We can't leave you, Jade protested. You have to. Someone needs to tell this story. I looked at my crystallized hand. I'm already part of them anyway. Reluctantly, they backed toward the exit. The ice beings made no move to stop them. Once they were gone, I turned back to the tall entity. I'll share everything I know, but on one condition. You have to stop taking without asking. Return to the old way. Accept only what's freely given. The creature seemed to consider, then nodded. A surprisingly human gesture. No! Eliza cried, her voice cracking like breaking ice. They need more than just your memories, Daniel. They need all of us. She lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my arm. Ice spread rapidly from her touch, climbing up my sleeve. They showed me everything, she hissed. I've seen what's coming. The warming won't stop. All of this will be gone within a century. Everything must be preserved. I tried to pull away, but her grip was impossibly strong. The ice continued to spread across my chest, heading toward my heart. Each place it touched went numb, the cold so intense it burned. The tall entity watched, making no move to help either. Oh, Bas, this isn't preservation, I gasped as the ice crept up my neck. This is fear. You're so afraid of losing the past that you're destroying the future. Eliza's eyes, now perfect ice crystals, stared into mine. The future is already lost. All that remains is to save what we can. With my free hand, the one still human, I reached for my grandfather's knife. The bone handle felt warm against my palm, almost burning in this intense cold. My grandfather told me something else about the White Memory Keepers, I said through chattering teeth. They can't hold what isn't freely given. I plunged the knife into the ice floor at our feet. The impact sent cracks spreading outward like a spider web. The tall entity made a sound like wind through ice caves, a cry of alarm. What have you done? Eliza screamed as the cracks widened. Given them a choice, I replied. Take by force and lose everything, or accept what's freely offered and survive. The ice beneath us groaned. The entire cavern trembled. Far above, icicles began to fall, shattering on the floor. The tall entity moved with sudden decision. It swept forward, placing one hand on Eliza's shoulder and one on my chest, directly over my heart. There was a moment of impossible cold, then a sensation of being pulled in two directions at once. The ice spreading over my body retreated slightly, while Eliza gasped as more of her form crystallized completely. You chose him, she whispered to the entity, her voice barely audible through the cracking ice. After everything I gave you, I offered, I corrected her. You took. The entity made another gesture, and the other ice beings flowed forward, surrounding Eliza. They merged with her crystalline form, their bodies becoming one with hers. What are they doing? I asked, backing. Away! The ice floor continued to crack beneath us. The entire cavern was becoming unstable. Whatever I had started by stabbing the knife into the floor, it was too late to stop it now. The tall entity pointed toward the exit, then at me. The message was clear. Go. What about you? I asked. It gestured to the now transforming Eliza, then to the walls of the cavern where thousands of memories were stored in ice. I understood. They were merging with Eliza, using her partly crystallized form as a new kind of vessel for their memories. Not perfect, but enough to save something as the glacier collapsed. I'll come back, I promised. When the storm passes, I'll help you find a new way. The entity nodded once, then turned back to join the others around Eliza. I ran toward the exit. As the cavern shook more violently, ice chunks fell from the ceiling, narrowly missing me. The beautiful archive was collapsing, centuries of memories falling into darkness. I scrambled up the twisted passage, my crystallized hands scraping against the ice walls. Behind me, I heard a tremendous crack, followed by a rumble that shook the entire glacier. Somehow, I made it out of the crevasse, just as a section of the glacier collapsed behind me, sealing the entrance to the ice caves forever. In the distance, I could see Sarah and Jade making their way toward the cabin, two small, dark figures against the endless white. The storm was easing, the sky beginning to clear. I looked down at my hand, still partly crystallized, still cold to the touch. But within the ice I could see tiny images forming and dissolving, like memories playing on a miniature screen. The white memory keepers had given me a piece of their archive to carry, to remember, to preserve, to share when the time was right. I turned and began the long walk back to the cabin, the snow crunching beneath my boots. Behind me, the glacier stood silent, its secrets once again locked deep within the ice, but not forgotten, never forgotten. 3 days later, a rescue helicopter finally reached us. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine landscape of untouched snow and ice. Sarah, Jade, and I were the only survivors. We told the search and rescue team that Mike and Dr. Peterson had been caught in an avalanche. We said Eliza had gone looking for them and never returned. It was easier than trying to explain the truth. Who would believe us anyway? Ice creatures that preserved memories. A scientist who willingly became part of their archive. They'd think we'd gone crazy from the cold and isolation. The official report blamed the deaths on extreme weather conditions and possible hypothermia-induced hallucinations. The case was closed within weeks. But I knew better. My hand remained, impartly crystallized, though I kept it hidden in a glove. Most people assumed I had frostbite. Only Sarah and Jade knew the truth. We made a pact never to speak of what happened, at least not to outsiders. I returned to my work in the park, but with a different focus now. I established new monitoring protocols for the Eastern Glacier region, combining scientific measurements with traditional observation methods my grandfather had taught me. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the mountains, I remove my glove and place my crystallized hand against the ice. Images flow into my mind, ancient forests that once grew where glaciers now stand. Animals long extinct roaming these valleys. My ancestors living in harmony with the land. The white memory keepers kept their word. They no longer take without permission, but they're still there, watching from within the ice, preserving what they can as the glaciers slowly melt. Park visitors occasionally report strange phenomena. Ice formations that seem to defy gravity, perfect geometric patterns appearing in freshly fallen snow, the sensation of being watched in empty snowfields. I listened to these stories carefully, looking for signs. Last winter, a group of climate researchers found something remarkable in their ice core samples. Perfectly preserved microscopic organisms thought extinct for millions of years. They couldn't explain how such perfect preservation was possible. I could have told them, but some secrets belong to the ice. Sometimes, on the coldest nights when the moon turns the snow to silver, I stand at my cabin window and watch the distant glaciers glow, with an inner light that can't be explained by science. And sometimes I see tall, thin figures moving across the snowfields, their crystalline bodies reflecting the moonlight. They're still out there, still watching, still remembering. And as long as I carry their memories in my hand, I'll remember. 2, because that's the thing about memories. They only truly die when there's no one left to share them, and some memories are too important to forget. My name is Thomas Hawkins, but folks call me Hawk. I'm 31 years old, and the first Black Ranger assigned to this part of the Okefenokee Swamp. It's a massive place, over 400,000 acres of dark water, cypress trees, and more critters than you can count. I've been here for just under a year, trying to keep poachers away from the wildlife. Before this job, I was a Marine, Force Recon. Vietnam took a lot from me, friends, peace of mind, and left me with these burn scars on my right arm from a helicopter. Crash. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm back there in the jungle, but the swamp has its own kind of peace, even with all its dangers. Out here, the only enemy I'm supposed to worry about is the occasional angry gator or poisonous snake. It's the middle of summer now, and I've never felt heat like this. The swamp is drying up in places where water should be deep. The air is so thick with humidity you could almost cut it with a knife. Every afternoon, the sky turns black with storm clouds, thunder shakes the ground. But the rain brings no relief, just more steam rising from the hot earth. I live in a small cabin near the ranger station. It's not much, but it's mine. The locals don't talk to me much. Some because I'm enforcing laws against hunting in protected areas, others because they don't like the color of my skin. I don't mind the silence. After Nam, I got used to being alone with my thoughts. This morning started like any other. I got up before dawn, made coffee on my little stove, and checked my gear. I always carry my grandfather's wooden whistle around my neck. He told me it keeps evil spirits away. I'm not sure I believe that, but it reminds me of him. I also wear my dog tags from the service, with the names of 2 friends who didn't make it home scratched on the back. The radio crackled as I was heading out the door. "Ranger Hawkins, you there?" "Over." It was my boss, Supervisor Reynolds. "I'm here, over," I answered, clipping the radio to my belt. "Got reports of unusual gator activity near the South Basin. Folks saying they're acting aggressive, coming up to boats. Can you check it out? Over." On my way, over and out, I grabbed my pack, my hat, and headed out to my boat. The swamp was quiet this morning. Too quiet. Usually you hear frogs, birds, insects, all making noise. Today, nothing. Just the splash of my paddle as I moved through the dark water. The cypress trees stretched up around me with Spanish moss hanging down like old curtains. The sun was trying to push through, making spots of light dance on the water. As I paddled deeper into the swamp, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I've been in enough dangerous spots to know when things aren't right. In Vietnam, we called it the ghost feeling, when the hairs on your neck stand up for no reason. I reached the South Basin after about an hour. The water here was different, usually dark brown from all the plants rotting in it, but in some spots it had a reddish tint that I'd never seen before. Dead fish floated on the surface, their white bellies up to the sky. But something was odd about them. Their scales were flipped the wrong way, like someone had turned their skin inside out. Then I saw the first dead gator. It was a big one, maybe 12 feet long, belly up near the bank. I paddled over and immediately noticed something. Wrong. Someone or something had cut it open, but only certain parts were removed. Not the skin or meat like poachers would take, just organs, specific ones. As I leaned over to get a better look, a splash behind me made me spin around so fast I nearly flipped my boat. About 50 yards away, the water was churning like something big had just submerged, much bigger than a normal gator. That's when I noticed the dead zone, a perfect circle, maybe 30 feet across, where every plant was dead. Not just dying, completely withered to nothing. In the middle of a thriving swamp, this circle of absolute death made no sense. I took samples of the water and plants, snapped some photos, and logged the location. But as the sun started to lower toward the horizon, That ghost feeling got stronger. I needed to get back to the station before dark. That's when my radio died. Just static, then nothing. I checked the batteries. Full charge. It was like something was blocking the signal. As I turned my boat around to head back, I saw it. Just for a second. Two red eyes glowing in the gathering dusk, watching me from between the cypress trees. Then they were gone. I told myself it was just the setting sun reflecting off the water, but deep down, I knew better. Something was awake in the Okefenokee, something that shouldn't be here, and it was watching me. I paddled back to the Ranger station as fast as I could. The whole way, I felt like something was following me, just under the water. Every splash made me jump. By the time I reached the dock, the sun was almost gone, and the first stars were showing. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Hawkins," said a voice from the shadows. I nearly jumped out of my skin before I saw who it was. Joseph Tanner, sitting on a bench near the dock, smoking a pipe. Joseph was 67 years old, with skin like old. Leather from a lifetime in the sun. He knew the swamp better than anyone. "Just jumpy today," I said, tying up my boat. "The swamp feels wrong." Joseph nodded slowly. "You felt it too. It's the heat. Water's too low, wakes things that should stay sleeping." I sat down next to him. "Found a dead gator today. Something took parts of it. Not like poachers." Joseph stopped smoking. His eyes got wide. "Where?" "South Basin, near a circle where all the plants are dead." He stood up so fast he dropped his pipe. "A perfect circle? You sure?" I nodded. Perfect as if someone drew it with a compass. "What's going on, Joseph?" He looked at the darkening swamp. "My granddaddy told stories, old stories from the Creek people, about something that lives deep in the swamp, something that wakes up when the water gets low." He picked up his pipe with shaking hands. "They called it the Thirsty One." "What is it supposed to be?" I asked. "Not supposed to be is..." He tapped his pipe out. "When the water drops, it gets thirsty, takes the water from living things." Joseph looked me dead in the eye. "Those circles? That's where it feeds. Sucks all the life out, even from the plants." I wanted to laugh it off as an old man's superstition, but after what I'd seen today, I couldn't. "How do you know all this?" "My people been here since before the white man came. We know what's real in the swamp." He stood up. "I'll take you tomorrow, show you some things you need to see if you're gonna survive this summer." That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside my cabin made me sit up. Around midnight, a storm rolled in. Lightning flashed, showing the trees outside my window like frozen ghosts. In one flash, I thought I saw a tall figure standing at the edge of the water, looking up at my cabin. But when the next lightning came, nothing was there. I dreamed of Vietnam that night, of the jungle and the sounds of helicopters. But in my dream, the enemy soldiers had scales and glowing red eyes. I woke up sweating, tangled in my sheets, reaching for a gun that wasn't there. Dawn came with heavy fog over the water. Joseph was already waiting at the dock when I arrived, a shotgun across his knees. "Thought we were just looking around," I said, pointing at the gun. "Better to have it and not need it," he replied. He didn't smile. We took my boat deeper into the swamp than I'd been before. Joseph pointed out landmarks only he could see, a bent tree here, a rock formation there. After about 2 hours, he told me to stop. "Listen," he whispered. I listened. "Nothing." "Exactly," said Joseph. "No birds, no frogs. Nothing living makes a sound near its feeding grounds." We drifted forward, and soon I saw another circle of dead. Plants bigger than the one from yesterday. At its edge lay 3 dead turtles, flipped on their backs. "It starts with the small things," Joseph said, "then gets bolder." As we examined the area, Joseph explained more. The Thirsty One was ancient, according to Creek legends. It hibernated for decades, sometimes half a century, waking only in the worst droughts. It needed the water from living, Screeches to stay alive. How do you fight something like that? I asked. My grandfather was part of a group that forced it back into sleep about 50 years ago, used salt and fire. Joseph looked troubled. But most of those who knew the old ways are gone now. As noon approached, we headed to a small island with a hunting cabin Joseph used. The heat was worse today, making the air shimmer above the water. While Joseph made us coffee on a small stove, I noticed a map on his wall with markers in different locations. "What are these?" I asked, pointing to the red X marks. Places where people disappeared, or where they found what was left of them. A chill ran down my back despite the heat. "Left of them?" Joseph nodded. "It doesn't just take water. Sometimes it takes skin, too. Wears it like a suit to hunt better." I thought of the skinned animals I'd heard reported. Thought maybe it was just poachers taking hides. Now I wasn't so sure. "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked. "Why not tell my supervisor or get help?" Joseph laughed without humor. "I tried. 10 years ago when the water got nearly this low. They called me a crazy old man." He sipped his coffee. "But you've seen it now. The circles, the red water, you felt it watching. That's why I'm telling you." Just then we heard a boat engine. Someone was coming. Joseph looked worried. "We shouldn't be out here with others," he said. "Not safe for them." The boat came into view. 3 men with rifles and fishing gear. Poachers, from the look of them. They spotted us and began to head over. "Well, look what we have here," called the one steering the boat. "The law and the crazy Indian. What brings you to our fishing spot?" "This area's restricted," I said, standing up. "No hunting or fishing permitted." They laughed. The biggest one, with a red beard, spat into the water. "Ain't nobody telling us where we can fish, especially not you." Joseph touched my arm. "Not worth the fight, Ranger. Let's go." The men blocked our path with their boat. "We ain't done talking," Redbeard said. "Maybe we ought to teach you both about swamp hospitality." That's when we heard the splash, a big one, behind the poacher's boat. They turned to look. The water bubbled and churned. "Big gator," one of them said, raising his rifle. "That's no gator," Joseph whispered to me. "We need to leave. Now." The water settled. The poachers laughed again, turning back to us. "Scared of a little old gator?" Redbeard mocked. I wasn't looking at him. I was looking past him at the water, at 2 red dots just breaking the surface, eyes glowing even in the daylight. "Get out of the water," I shouted to them. "Now!" But it was too late. Something surged up from behind their boat, flipping it like a toy. The men yelled as they fell into the swamp. For a second I saw it, bigger than any gator, with a long, scaled body, but standing on 2 legs. Then it disappeared under the churning water with the screaming men. Joseph started our boat's motor. "Go!" he yelled. "Go!" I gunned the engine as the water behind us boiled red. The screams stopped suddenly. As we sped away, I looked back once. Redbeard's hat floated on the crimson water. Nothing else remained. We made it back to the ranger station in record time. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely tie up the boat. Joseph hadn't said a word the whole way back. "We have to report this," I finally said. "Those men are dead." Joseph shook his head. "Report what? That a swamp monster ate some poachers? They'll lock us both up." He was right. I rubbed my face, trying to think. "Then we say it was a gator attack, a big bull gator." "You do what you gotta do," Joseph said, lighting his pipe with trembling fingers. "But you know what we saw," I called. "It in on the radio. Supervisor Reynolds said he'd send a search team out tomorrow." When I hung up, Joseph was staring at the swamp, his eyes distant. "It's moving," he said, "feeding, growing stronger. It'll come to the edges soon, looking for more." "More what?" I asked, though I was afraid I knew the answer. "More life. More water, more skin." He stood up. "I need to show you something else, something important, but not today. Meet me at sunrise at the old fire tower." That evening I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those red eyes, the water turning crimson. I tried to tell myself it was just a big alligator, maybe an undiscovered species, but deep down, I knew better. Around midnight, my radio crackled to life. At first, just static. Then, a voice, not Reynolds, not anyone I knew. "Hawkins," it hissed, a strange voice, like someone talking through water. "I see you, Hawkins." I grabbed the radio. "Who is this? Identify yourself." Silence. Then, "The water calls to you. Come." "To the water, Hawkins." A cold sweat broke out all over me. The voice didn't sound human. "Who is this?" I demanded again. The radio emitted a sound like wet breathing. Then silence. I tried calling Reynolds, but got nothing but static. All communications were down. I jumped at every sound that night. Twice, I thought I saw a shape move past my window. Just before dawn, I dozed off from pure exhaustion. In my dreams, I was back in the swamp, but it was different. The trees were bleeding red sap. The water bubbled like it was boiling. My old platoon from Vietnam was there, but their faces were wrong, scaly with red eyes. They kept telling me to come into the water with them. I woke with a gasp as the first light of day hit my window. Time to meet Joseph. The old fire tower stood on the edge of the swamp, a rusted metal skeleton rising above the trees. It hadn't been used in years, but it still gave a view for miles around. Joseph was already climbing it when I arrived. "Up here," he called down. I followed him up the creaking metal stairs. At the top, Joseph handed me a pair of binoculars. "Look," he said, pointing southeast. "Tell me what you see." I looked through the binoculars. At first, just trees and water. Then I noticed something strange. There are circles, dead spots, at least 5 or 6 of them. "Now look there," Joseph directed, pointing in another direction. I swung the binoculars around. More dead circles, forming a pattern across the swamp. "It's mapping the swamp," Joseph said, "marking its territory, feeding grounds." I lowered the binoculars. "You said your grandfather fought this thing. How?" Joseph pulled an old leather pouch from his pocket. Inside was what looked like a map drawn on deer skin. "This shows where the creature sleeps, where its home is. Deep in the swamp, there's an old cypress tree, bigger than any other, hollow inside. Leads down to caves under the water. That's where it lives. And that's where we need to go," I said, understanding. Joseph nodded. "To put it back to sleep or kill it. But we'll need supplies, salt, lots of it, fire, and this." He handed me a small clay pot filled with red soil. "Creek medicine for protection." As we climbed down from the tower, I noticed dark clouds gathering. "Storm coming," I said. "Not just any storm," Joseph replied, looking worried. "Look at those clouds, moving against the wind. Not natural." He was right. The clouds were swirling in a strange pattern directly above where the creature had attacked. "The poachers yesterday. We spent the rest of the morning gathering supplies. Salt, kerosene, flares from my emergency kit. I also grabbed my service pistol, though I wasn't sure it would do much good. Joseph brought more of his medicine, clay mixtures and herbs I didn't recognize." By noon, the sky had darkened to an odd purplish black. The air felt charged, like right before lightning strikes. We loaded everything into my boat. "We should wait for the storm to pass," I suggested. Joseph shook his head. "No time. It's growing too fast. Those men it took yesterday. It's wearing their skins now, learning from them." A cold feeling spread through my chest. "What do you mean, learning from them?" "It absorbs, not just water, memories too, knowledge." Joseph looked grim. "That's why it's dangerous. It gets smarter with every person it takes." As if to confirm his words, my radio crackled again. "This time," I heard Redbeard's voice clear as day. "Help us, Ranger. We're trapped. Southern Basin." I looked at Joseph, who slowly shook his head. "It's not them. It's it, using their voices." The radio crackled again, another poacher's voice. "For God's sake, help us." I turned the radio off. "Let's go." We pushed off from the dock just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. The storm was like nothing I'd ever seen. The rain came, sideways, stinging like needles. Lightning struck all around us, too close for comfort. The water level was rising fast, creating strong currents that made steering difficult. "Head east!" Joseph shouted over the wind, "toward the big cypress." As we traveled deeper into the swamp, I noticed more dead circles, larger than before. In some spots, the water had turned completely red, thick as blood. Dead fish and snakes floated everywhere. Then we saw the boat, the poacher's boat, somehow upright again, drifting in the middle of the channel, and standing in it, Redbeard, waving for help. "Don't stop," Joseph warned. "That's not him anymore." I steered a wide berth around the boat. As we passed, I got a good look at Redbeard. From a distance, he looked normal, but up close his skin hung wrong, like an ill-fitting suit. And his eyes were glowing red. "Help me, Ranger," it called in Redbeard's voice. Then its mouth opened wider than any human mouth should, showing rows of needle-like teeth. Joseph fired his shotgun. The thing that wasn't Redbeard screeched, a sound no human throat could make, and fell back into the water. "Faster," Joseph urged. "It's calling for others." Sure enough, I saw movement in the water all around us. Eyes, dozens of red eyes, just breaking the surface. "Small gators and snakes all moving together, following us. It controls them," Joseph explained. "The smaller reptiles, extensions of itself." The rain was coming down so hard now I could barely see. The wind howled through the cypress trees, bending them like straws. I kept the throttle wide open, praying we wouldn't hit a submerged log. "There," Joseph pointed ahead. Through the curtain of rain, I saw it. An enormous cypress tree, ancient and gnarled, rising like a giant from the water. Even from a distance, I could tell it was different. The bark was darker, with strange patterns that seemed to move when lightning flashed. "That's its home," I shouted over the storm. Joseph nodded. "The entrance to its lair, where it sleeps between feedings." As we approached the giant tree, the water around us began to churn and bubble. Red eyes appeared everywhere, surrounding us. Not just animals now, human shapes too, standing in the shallow water, all with those same glowing red eyes. "They're trying to stop us," Joseph said, reloading his shotgun. I gunned the motor, aiming straight for the massive tree. "Hang on!" The boat shot forward, crashing through the circle of watchers. They reached for us with pale, dripping hands, but we were moving too fast. Lightning struck the giant cypress just as we reached it, illuminating a dark opening at its base, a doorway into the heart of the swamp, into the monster's home. The boat scraped against the base of the giant cypress tree. The opening was barely visible, a dark crack in the massive trunk just above the waterline. Joseph jumped out first, splashing into knee-deep water. I followed, grabbing our supply. "Bag, stay close," Joseph whispered. "And whatever you do, don't look directly into its eyes if we see it." The crack was bigger than it looked from outside. We squeezed through into darkness. I clicked on my flashlight and immediately wished I hadn't. We were inside the hollow trunk of the cypress. But the walls weren't wood. They were lined with skins, animal skins mostly. Snakes, gators, deer. But there were others too. Skins that looked human, stretched and dried like leather. "My God," I whispered, my light trembling across the horrible display. "It collects them," Joseph said. "Uses them when it needs to hunt." Water dripped from above. The inside of the tree was damp and hot like a greenhouse. The smell was terrible, like copper and rotting plants. My flashlight beam showed a hole in the floor with crude steps leading down into water. "That's the way to its sleeping place," Joseph said. "Underwater. Caves. How can we go down there? We can't breathe underwater." Joseph pointed to the walls. "The tunnels rise and fall, pockets of air. My grandfather mapped them." He pulled out the deerskin map again. "We need to find the central chamber. That's where it keeps its original skin. Original skin? The one it was born with, its power source. Destroy that and it weakens." I stared at the dark hole. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. But I thought of those poachers, of the red eyes spreading through the swamp. This thing wouldn't stop. "I'll go first," I said. The steps were slippery with moss. They led down about 15 feet before disappearing into black water. I shined my light into the depths but couldn't see the bottom. "Take a deep breath," Joseph advised. "First air pocket is about 20 feet in." I filled my lungs, then plunged into the cold water. It was like swimming in ink. I couldn't see anything except what my flashlight illuminated directly in front of me. I followed the tunnel downward, trying not to panic as my lungs started to burn. Just when I thought I couldn't hold my breath any longer, the tunnel curved upward. I broke the surface in a small air pocket, gulping oxygen. Joseph appeared beside me seconds later. "This way," he said, pointing to where the tunnel continued. We swam through 3 more tunnels and air pockets. Each chamber was larger than the last. The walls were smooth, as if something had worn them down over centuries. In some places, I saw more skins stretched across the rock. The 5th air pocket opened into a large cave. Dry land rose from the water here, a rock shelf covered in strange symbols carved into the stone. My flashlight revealed more tunnels leading off in different directions. "We're close," Joseph whispered. "Can you feel it?" I could. The air here was different, heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. My skin tingled and the burn scars on my arm throbbed with dull pain. "Which way?" I asked. Joseph consulted his map. "That one," he said, pointing to the largest tunnel. As we waded through shallow water toward it, I heard something. A soft, wet sound, like cloth being dragged across stone. We froze. "Turn off your light," Joseph hissed. I clicked it off. In the perfect darkness, the sound grew louder. Coming from the tunnel ahead, coming toward us. Then I saw them. Red eyes floating in the darkness. 2 at first, then 4, then dozens, filling the tunnel like evil stars. "Run," Joseph said. "Back to the last junction." We splashed through the water, not caring about noise now. Behind us, the eyes followed, moving faster than we could. I heard that dragging sound growing louder. We reached the junction and took a different tunnel. This one sloped upward, the water getting shallower. We ran, slipping on wet rocks, gasping for breath. The tunnel opened into another large cave. This one had a high ceiling, with holes letting in faint daylight from above. Rain still poured through these openings, creating small waterfalls around the edges. In the center of the cave stood what I first thought was a tree. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was something else. A tall pole made of twisted branches and bones, wrapped with hundreds of skins. At the very top was what looked like an alligator skin, but larger than any gator I'd ever seen. And wrong, somehow, shaped to walk on 2 legs. "That's it," Joseph said. "Its first skin, the source of its power." A noise behind us. The red eyes had followed. They poured into the cave surrounding us. Now in the dim light I could see their owners. Gators, snakes, birds, all moving together, all with those same glowing eyes. And behind them human shapes, the poachers, and others I didn't recognize, all moving stiffly like puppets, all with skin that hung wrong on their frames. "It's controlling them all," I said. Joseph nodded, pulling out his shotgun. "Keep them back. I need to destroy the skin." I drew my pistol as Joseph rushed toward the center pole. The creatures came at us from all sides. I fired at the nearest, ones trying to clear a path. The animals fell, but the human shapes kept coming. I couldn't bring myself to shoot them, even knowing they weren't human anymore. Joseph reached the pole and began climbing. He pulled out the kerosene, pouring it over the skins. One of the human shapes, Redbeard, grabbed at his legs. I ran forward, swinging my flashlight like a club. It connected with a wet thud, and Redbeard fell back. I looked into his face and nearly dropped my weapon. His skin was sloughing off, revealing something underneath, something with scales and suction. "Cups instead of skin, hurry." I shouted to Joseph. He had reached the original skin at the top. He took out matches, trying to light them in the damp air. 2 struck with no flame. The 3rd caught. As Joseph touched the flame to the kerosene-soaked skins, a scream filled the cave. Not human, not animal. A sound that hurt my ears and made my teeth vibrate. The water around us began to churn and bubble. From one of the tunnels, a new shape emerged, larger than the others. At first, it looked like a giant alligator walking on its hind legs, but as it moved into the light, I saw it was shedding its outer skin, revealing what lay beneath. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, with a gaunt humanoid body. But instead of skin, its surface was covered in thousands of circular suction cups, each pulsing with an inner red light. Its face was barely a face at all, just 2 huge glowing red eyes above a mouth full of needle teeth. The skin taker. The thirsty one. It saw Joseph at the pole, saw the flames beginning to catch. It screamed again and charged. I emptied my pistol into it. The bullets hit but seemed to pass through without effect, like shooting water. It didn't even slow down. "Joseph!" I yelled in warning. He turned, saw the creature coming. In one smooth motion, he tossed me the rest of the kerosene and pulled something from his pocket. Salt. He threw it directly at the charging monster. Where the salt touched its body, the suction cups shriveled and turned black. The creature howled. In pain, its charge faltering. Joseph threw more salt, driving it back. "The salt dries it out," he called to me. "It can't stand it." I remembered what he'd said earlier. This thing needed moisture. It drank the water from living beings. I grabbed the bag of salt from our supplies and began throwing handfuls at the smaller creatures surrounding us. They fell back, hissing and writhing. But there were too many, and the big one, the original, was still coming, pushing through the pain of the salt. "The skin!" Joseph shouted, still clinging to the pole. "Burn it all!" The flames were spreading up the pole now, reaching the original skin. The main creature let out another terrible scream and lunged forward with new strength. It caught Joseph by the leg and pulled. Joseph fell, crashing to the stone floor. I heard the crack of bone from where I stood. He didn't get up. "No!" I yelled, running toward him. The creature turned to me, its red eyes pulsing with hate. I threw the kerosene bottle at it. The glass shattered against its chest, soaking it with fuel. Then I struck my last flare. The creature burst into flames, thrashing and howling. The fire spread quickly, consuming its drying body. All around the cave, the smaller creatures collapsed like puppets with cut strings. I ran to Joseph. He was alive, but barely. His leg was bent at a wrong angle, and blood trickled from his mouth. "The skin," he whispered. "Make sure it burns." The pole was fully engulfed now, the original skin blackening and curling in the flames. The creature thrashed and screamed, its body beginning to shrivel. "It's working," I told Joseph. "It's dying." He shook his head weakly. "Not dying, sleeping, will come back when the water gets low again." The cave was filling with smoke. We needed to get out. I tried to lift Joseph, but he pushed me away. "Too late for me," he said. "Been bitten." He showed me his arm. Where the creature had grabbed him, his skin was grey and shrunken like all. The moisture had been sucked out. "I'm not leaving you," I insisted. "You must." His eyes were clear and determined. "Someone has to remember, to warn others when the time comes." Before I could argue more, the ground shook. The water level in the cave was rising rapidly as the rain from the storm poured in. The tunnels were flooding. "Go," Joseph urged. "Through there," he pointed to a small opening high on the wall, "leads to the surface." I looked at the creature, still burning, but moving less now. The other controlled animals and people lay still on the cave floor. "Will they come back?" I asked. Looking at the human shapes, Joseph shook his head. "Their bodies maybe, but not them. They're gone." Another tremor shook the cave. Rocks fell from the ceiling. Time was running out. "Go," Joseph said again. "Remember what you saw. Write it down. Others need to know." I clasped his hand one last time, then climbed toward the opening he'd pointed out. It was narrow, but I squeezed through. A tight tunnel led upward, with roots pushing through the dirt walls. I clawed my way up, lungs burning from smoke and exertion. After what seemed like hours, I broke through to the surface. I was on a small island about 100 yards from the giant cypress tree. Rain still poured down, but the strange purple clouds were breaking up. Normal storm clouds replaced them. From where I stood, I could see the cypress tree. Smoke poured from holes in its trunk. As I watched, there was a final tremor, and the great tree slowly leaned to one side. With a massive splash, it fell into the swamp, disappearing beneath the churning water. It was over. For now. I'm not sure how long I sat there in the rain, watching. The spot where the giant cypress had stood for hundreds of years. Minutes, maybe hours. The storm was passing now. The strange purple clouds were gone, replaced by normal grey ones. The rain became a light drizzle, then stopped. I was alone. No boat, no radio. And Joseph was gone. I had to get back to the station somehow. My arm hurt where the creature had touched me during the fight. The skin was dry and grey in a small patch, but it wasn't spreading like with Joseph, just a reminder of what had happened. I waded into the water, checking for any sign of red eyes. Nothing. The swamp felt normal again, frogs croaking, birds starting to call, life returning. I began to swim, heading in what I hoped was the right direction. After about half a mile, I got lucky. I found a small john boat, probably broken loose from someone's dock during the storm. No motor, just a paddle. But it was better than swimming. It took me most of the day to make it back. The sun was setting by the time the ranger station came into view. I've never been so happy to see that weathered old building. Supervisor Reynolds was there with a search team, loading up boats. When they saw me, their faces showed relief, then confusion. "Hawkins, where the hell have you been?" Reynolds called. "And where's your boat? Where's Tanner?" I paddled up to the dock. My clothes were torn, my skin scratched and bruised. I must have looked half crazy. "There was an accident," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Joseph didn't make it. They pulled me from the boat, sat me down, gave me water and a blanket. They asked questions, so many questions. Where had we gone? What happened? Where was Joseph's body?" I told them a version of the truth. We'd gone looking for the poachers, found signs of an alligator attack, got caught in the storm. Our boat capsized. Joseph was pulled under by the current. I managed to swim to an island, found another boat. They didn't believe all of it. I could see it in their eyes, but they couldn't explain my condition or why I'd been gone so long. They wrote it up as an accident, a tragedy of the swamp. Nobody mentioned the red water, or the dead circles, or the strange eyes people had reported seeing. At dusk, it was easier to forget those things, to pretend they hadn't happened, but I couldn't forget. That night, they let me go back to my cabin after the doctor checked me out. I should have slept for days after what I'd been through, but I couldn't. Close my eyes. Every time I did, I saw those red eyes staring back at me. Instead, I started writing. Everything that had happened, everything Joseph had told me. I wrote until my hand cramped, then kept writing. Someone needed to know. Someone needed to remember. When morning came, I went back to the station. Reynolds was there looking worried. "Search team found those poachers," he said. My heart froze. "What?" "Their boat, anyway. Empty. No sign of bodies." He shook his head. "Gators must have got them." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Also found something weird. He led me to a map spread out on his desk. These dead spots all over the swamp, perfect circles where nothing's growing. Scientists are coming to check it out. Never seen anything like it. "It'll heal," I said. "The swamp always heals itself." Reynolds gave me a strange look, but didn't argue. A week passed. The scientists came and went, taking samples, scratching their heads over the dead zones. They blamed pollution, maybe. Chemical dumping. Easier to believe than the truth. The dead patch on my arm faded to a dull scar, joining the burn marks from Vietnam. Just one more reminder of things I'd rather forget. I kept writing my account. And I started mapping the swamp in a new way. Marking the dead zones, tracking their pattern. They were fading but not gone completely. I needed to know if they ever came back. One night, about a month after it all happened, someone knocked on my cabin door. It was late, past midnight. I opened it carefully, my hand near my gun. A young man stood there, looked to be in his 30s, with Joseph's eyes and nose. "You Ranger Hawkins?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm Michael Tanner, Joseph's son." He looked past me into the cabin. "My father isn't really dead, is he?" The question hit me like a punch. "What makes you say that?" "No body found. And you don't act like a man who saw his friend drown." Michael's eyes were hard. "I want to know what really happened. I could have lied, could have stuck to my story." But something in his face, the same determination I'd seen in Joseph, stopped me. "Come in," I said. "This is going to take a while." I told him everything. The creature, the red eyes, the feeding grounds, his father's sacrifice. As I talked, Michael's face went from disbelief to horror to a kind of grim acceptance. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Then my father told me stories when I was a kid, about something in the swamp. I thought they were just stories." "They weren't," I said. "He tried to warn people before, didn't he?" "No one believed him." I nodded. "Just like they wouldn't believe us now." Michael stood up. "What happens next time, when the water gets low again?" "Joseph said it hibernates. Maybe 50 years, maybe less if it's disturbed." "Then we have to be ready," Michael said. "We have to remember." In that moment, I saw Joseph in him. The same sense of duty, the same connection to this place. "I've been writing it all down," I told him, "every detail, and I've been mapping the dead zones, watching to see if they come back." Michael nodded. "Good. I'm a biologist at the university. I can help, monitor the water levels, the wildlife patterns." We talked until dawn, making plans, not just for us, but for those who would come after us, creating a system, a protocol, signs to watch for, ways to fight it when it returned. As the sun rose over the swamp, turning the mist golden, I felt something I hadn't felt since that day in the cave. Hope. The swamp looked peaceful in the morning light. Birds called, fish jumped, life continued, as it always did. But now I knew what lurked beneath that peaceful surface, what slept in the dark water, waiting for the next drought, the next low water. I still work as a ranger here, still patrol these waters every day. Most days, it's just a job, checking permits, helping lost tourists, keeping poachers away. But every evening, as the sun sets and dusk creeps over the water, I watch for those red eyes. They're out there, sleeping, waiting. And when they open again, I'll be ready. We'll all be ready. My name is Deborah Mitchell, but everyone calls me Deb. I've spent the last 10 years working as a ranger and cave rescue specialist at Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky. Most people don't know that this place holds the longest cave system in the world, over 400 miles of mapped passages, and we keep finding more. I find peace in the darkness that most people can't understand. Down there, in the absolute black, where sound plays tricks on you, sometimes dying away to nothing, sometimes bouncing back louder than it should, I feel at home. It's the one place where my troubled mind goes quiet. This spring has been unusually cold and wet. The snowmelt and constant rain mean the lower cave levels could flood without warning. It's the kind of condition that keeps most visitors and even experienced cavers away. But not everyone listens to warnings. I didn't know it then, but what happened in that newly discovered branch of the cave system would change me forever. This is my story of what we found in Bone Hollow, what found us, and why I'll never truly leave that place again. I wasn't always a cave person. Before my life underground, I was training for the Olympics in rock climbing. That dream ended when I fell during a competition and shattered my right leg. The doctor said I was lucky to walk again, even with this limp I carry now. After the accident, I went back to school, got my doctorate in cave science, and found my way to Mammoth Cave. My grey hair came early, stress, the doctor said, and I keep it in a tight braid to keep it out of my way. My ex-husband used to say my laugh lines didn't match my serious eyes. I guess he was right about a lot of things, including that my job was too dangerous for him to handle. We signed the divorce papers last year. The morning everything started, I was drinking coffee in the ranger station when the call came in. 3 experienced cavers had gone missing in a newly mapped section we called the Eastern Branch. They'd been due back 12 hours ago. "Deb, we need you on this one," my boss said, handing me the missing persons report. "They're all level 3, certified. No way they just got lost." I nodded, already reaching for my gear bag. Inside was my lucky titanium carabiner from my Olympic days and my grandmother's turquoise ring. She said it protected against hollow earth spirits. I never believed those old stories, but I wore it anyway. "I'll need Marcus on this one," I said, referring to Dr. Marcus Winters, who was studying bacteria in the caves for the National Science Foundation. My boss raised an eyebrow. Everyone knew Marcus and I had history, the kind that makes working together complicated. But he was the best cave scientist I knew, and something about this disappearance felt wrong. "Already called him," my boss said. "He's meeting you at the Eastern Branch entrance in 30 minutes. When I arrived, Marcus was already there, checking his equipment. His beard had more grey than the last time I'd seen him, but his eyes lit up the same way when he spotted me. "Been a while, Deb," he said, offering his hand. 6 months, 2 weeks, I replied, shaking it quickly. "Let's focus on the missing cavers." We gathered our team, 4 rescue specialists, plus Marcus and me. The Eastern Branch was new territory, mapped just last year. As we entered the cave, the temperature dropped to a steady 55 degrees. The sound of water dripping echoed around us, and our headlamps cut through darkness so complete it felt like a living thing. Their last check-in was at the Crystal Junction, I said, pointing at the map. Then they were heading to explore what might be a new chamber beyond. As we moved deeper, I felt the familiar calm that caves always brought me. But there was something else too, a strange feeling I couldn't place, like when you think someone's watching you but you're alone. 3 hours in, we found their first camp. The equipment was laid out neatly, cooking gear, sleeping bags, food, supplies. Everything was in perfect order, too perfect. People in a hurry don't fold their sleeping bags. "They planned to come back here," Marcus said, examining a notebook one of them had left behind. I picked up a helmet with a headlamp still attached. The battery was completely dead. Strange for experienced cavers who would have checked their equipment. "Look at this," said Mike, one of our team members. He was pointing his light at the cave wall. There, in the clay near the floor, was a handprint. It looked human, but something was off about the proportions. "That's old," Marcus said, kneeling, to examine it. "Really old? How old?" I asked. "I'd need to test it, but thousands of years, maybe." He looked up at me, his face serious in the harsh light of our lamps. "And Deb, it shouldn't be here. Not this deep." That night, as we set up our own camp near their abandoned one, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The darkness beyond our light seemed deeper somehow, and I could have sworn I heard whispers just at the edge of hearing. None of us slept well that night. Morning in a cave isn't really morning at all. There's no sunrise, just the moment when you turn your headlamp back on and chase away the dark for another day. We packed up our gear and pushed deeper into the eastern branch. The map showed a narrow passage ahead that opened into a larger chamber, where the Cavers planned to explore. "I don't like this," said Lisa, our team's medical specialist. "Their gear was fine. Why would they leave it?" "Maybe they found something exciting and planned a quick look before coming back," Mike suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. The passage grew tighter, forcing us to remove our packs and push them ahead of us. The rough limestone scraped against my back as I inched forward. Even after all these years, I still had to control my breathing in tight spaces. "Hold up!" Marcus called from ahead. "I'm seeing something strange." We all froze. In cave rescue, strange is never good. When we finally squeezed through into the chamber, I saw what had caught Marcus's attention. The walls were covered with stalactites, but they weren't growing like normal ones. Some curved sideways, others seemed to grow against gravity. "This shouldn't be possible," Marcus whispered, shining his light upward. I moved my light across the chamber and stopped when I saw markings carved into a flat section of wall. They weren't English or any language I recognized, just strange symbols in circular patterns. "Those looked like the markers the Anderson family talked about," I said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "The local legends about the Hollow Folk?" I nodded. "The Andersons had lived near the cave for generations. Old man Anderson once told me about the Hollow Folk who borrowed people who went too deep into certain caves. I'd written it off as superstition. Let's split into pairs and search the chamber," I said. "Stay within sight of each other." Marcus and I took the left side. As we moved deeper, I noticed something odd. The temperature, which should be a steady 55 degrees, suddenly dropped. My breath clouded in front of my face. "It's at least 20 degrees colder here," Marcus said, checking his thermometer. "There's no natural explanation for this." I was about to respond when my headlamp flickered and went out. I tapped it and it came back on, but dimmer. "Battery's draining," I said, reaching for my spare. Then I noticed Marcus checking his too. "Mine as well," he said. "It was fully charged this morning." A shout from across the chamber made us both turn. Mike was pointing at something on the ground. We hurried over to find a backpack partially hidden behind a rock formation. It belonged to one of the missing cavers. Inside we found a journal. The last entry, written in shaky handwriting, read, "They're in the walls, they're watching us, don't trust the formations." "What does that mean?" Lisa asked, her voice tight with tension. I was about to answer when a soft sound echoed through the chamber, something between a whisper and the sound of stone grinding against stone. We all went still, listening. "Did anyone else hear that?" Mike asked. Everyone nodded. I played my light slowly across the chamber walls. For a second, I thought I saw something move, but when I looked directly at it, there was nothing but stone. "Over there," Marcus pointed to a narrow opening we hadn't noticed before. "That might lead further in." As we approached the opening, I felt a strange taste in my mouth, like licking a metal spoon. The air current coming from the passage was wrong, too. It should have been flowing outward, but instead it pushed against us, as if the cave was breathing in. That night, I had a dream. I saw people in animal skins performing some kind of ritual deep in the cave. They were leaving offerings at stone markers identical to the ones we'd found. When I woke up, my heart was racing, and I could have sworn I knew about passages we hadn't mapped yet. "Did you sleep?" Marcus asked, handing me a coffee from our supplies. "Not really," I admitted. "Had weird dreams." "Same here," he said quietly. "About ancient rituals in the cave?" I nearly dropped my cup. "How did you know?" "Before he could answer, the ground beneath us trembled. A low rumble filled the chamber, growing louder until small rocks began to fall from the ceiling. "Cave in!" I shouted. "Everyone to the center!" We barely made it away from the walls when a massive section of the passage we'd come through collapsed. The sound was deafening. and dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. When it finally settled, we found ourselves cut off from the way we'd come in. "No going back that way," Lisa said, coughing from the dust. I checked my radio, but as I expected, we were too deep for a signal. "We need to find another way out," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "and maybe we'll find our missing cavers while we're at it." But as I looked at the strange passage that was now our only option, the metal taste in my mouth grew stronger, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for us deeper in the cave. With our exit blocked, we had no choice but to move deeper into the unknown parts of the cave. I took out our map and added the collapse, marking our new route with a dotted line into blank space. "The main rescue team won't come looking for at least 24 hours, I said, checking my watch. "We have enough supplies for 3 days. If we're careful." We moved into the narrow passage, which twisted downward at a gentle slope. The walls here were different, smoother, almost polished in places, with more of those strange symbols appearing occasionally. "These look like handprints again," Marcus said, shining his light on a section of wall. "But they're inside the rock, like someone put their hand in mud, but the mud turned to stone with their hand still in it." I ran my fingers over the impression. It was cool to the touch, but something about it made my skin crawl. As we continued, the passage widened into a series of small chambers. In one, we found something that made us all stop. A perfect circle of stones on the floor, with a larger carved stone in the center. "It's like an altar," Lisa whispered. Mike knelt down to examine it closer. "Some of these stones aren't from this cave system. They're not even from Kentucky." That's when I noticed the fish. In a small pool near the altar, white cave fish swam, lazily in the beam of my light. But unlike normal cave fish, which are blind after generations in darkness, these had eyes, small black dots that seemed to follow our movements. "That's impossible," Marcus said, already taking samples. "These fish should be blind." "A lot of impossible things happening today," I muttered. We pressed on, and I began to notice something strange happening to me. At each fork in the passage, I somehow knew which way to go. It was as if I'd been here before, though I knew that was impossible. "How are you so sure about the route?" Marcus asked, after I confidently chose the third turning without hesitation. I don't know," I admitted. "It's like I remember it from my dreams, maybe." His face grew concerned. "Deb, that's not normal." "None of this is normal," I replied. Around midday, according to our watches, we stopped to eat and rest. As I sat against the wall, I felt something strange. A vibration, almost too faint to notice. "Does anyone else feel that?" I asked. They all shook their heads, but when I pressed my ear against the wall, I heard it clearly. Whispered conversations in a language I didn't understand, coming from inside the solid rock. "There's someone talking in there," I said, pulling away from the wall. Marcus gave me a worried look before trying it himself. His eyes widened. "I hear it too," he confirmed, "but that's not possible. Sound can't travel through solid limestone. Like that." We all took turns listening, and everyone heard the same impossible whispers. "It's like they know we're here," Lisa said, her voice shaking slightly. "Let's keep moving," I suggested, not wanting to admit how much the voices unsettled me. As we went deeper, the cave began to feel less like a natural formation and more like something built or grown with purpose. The passages became more regular, the ceilings higher, and all the while I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, not by cameras or people, but by the cave itself. "Do you feel like the cave is alive?" I asked Marcus quietly. As we walked, he didn't laugh like I expected. Instead, he nodded slowly. "I've been studying caves for 20 years, and I've never felt anything like this. It's as if the whole system is one big organism." We came to a large chamber with a ceiling, so high our lights couldn't reach it. Massive stone columns connected floor to ceiling, but they weren't the normal round columns formed by joining stalagmites and stalactites. These were twisted, almost like bodies frozen in strange poses. I don't like this place, Mike said, his light darting nervously from column to column. I was about to suggest we move through quickly when Lisa screamed. We all spun around, lights focusing on where she stood. She was pointing at one of the columns, her hand shaking. I saw it move, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Stone doesn't move, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure I believed them anymore. We all stared at the column. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then, just at the edge of our light beams, I saw it. A slight shifting, like stone flowing like thick honey. We need to go, Marcus said, his voice tight. Now. As we hurried toward the far side of the chamber, I glanced back. In the dim light, the columns looked different now. More like figures standing perfectly still, watching us leave. The new passage sloped steeply downward, taking us deeper than I'd ever been in the cave system. The air grew warmer instead of cooler, which made no sense, and the metal taste in my mouth was now so strong I could barely stand it. We have to be at least 500 feet below the surface now, Marcus noted. Checking his altimeter, that's when we heard it, a clear human voice calling for help from somewhere ahead. "Hello!" I shouted. "Is someone there?" The voice called again, and this time I recognized it. It belonged to one of our missing cavers. We rushed forward, turning a corner to find a smaller chamber with a pool of still water. The voice seemed to come from beyond it. "Hello?" I called again, but the only answer was a strange sound, like stone grinding against stone, and a ripple across the water's surface when nothing had touched it. "Something's wrong," I whispered. "This feels like a trap." Just then my headlamp caught something at the edge of the pool, a helmet, the same kind our missing cavers had been wearing. I moved closer to examine it and saw something that made my blood run cold. The helmet wasn't just sitting on the rock, it was halfway embedded in it, as if the stone had grown around it. "How is this possible?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, a hand burst from the solid rock wall beside her, reaching out as if trying to grab something. We all jumped back, watching in horror as the hand, very human-looking but with a strange grayish tint, strained outward for a moment before being slowly pulled back into the seemingly solid stone. "Run!" I shouted. We ran until our lungs burned, not stopping, until we were far from that terrible pool. When we finally paused to catch our breath, we huddled together, our headlamps creating a small circle of light in the vast darkness. "What was that?" Mike gasped between breaths. No one had an answer. How could we explain a human hand moving through solid rock? "We need to regroup and think," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's find a safe place to rest." We found a small chamber with only one entrance that we could watch. As we set up a minimal camp, I noticed Lisa's hands were shaking so badly she could barely open her pack. "Hey," I said gently, "we're going to figure this out." She nodded, but didn't look convinced. None of us were. "I think I know what's happening," Marcus said suddenly. We all turned to him. "The local legends about the hollow folk, I think they're real," he continued, "but not in the way people thought. I think there's something in this cave system, some kind of organism that can move through stone like we move through air." "That's crazy," Mike said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Marcus asked. "We've all seen impossible things today. And think about it. What if there's a life form that evolved down here, completely separate from the surface world?" I remembered my grandmother's stories about the hollow earth spirits and the protection her turquoise ring supposedly offered. I touched it instinctively. "If you're right," I said slowly, "then what happened to our missing cavers?" No one wanted to suggest the obvious, that they might have been taken by whatever lived in these walls. As we talked, I noticed something strange about one of the walls of our chamber. Unlike the rest of the cave, it seemed to glow faintly with a blue-green light. "Look," I said, pointing. "Is that bioluminescent fungi?" Marcus moved closer to examine it. "It's similar but different from any cave fungi I've studied. The structure is more complex. As he leaned in, the glow suddenly intensified, and Marcus jumped back. "It reacted to me," he said, eyes wide. I was about to respond when a low rumble shook the chamber. Dust and small rocks fell from the ceiling. "Another collapse?" Lisa asked. "I don't think so," I said, feeling the strange vibration in the stone beneath my feet. "It feels more like movement." The rumbling stopped as suddenly as it had started. In the silence that followed, we heard something that turned my blood to ice, the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming down the passage toward our chamber. We all turned toward the entrance, lights focused on the darkness beyond. The footsteps grew louder, but we couldn't see anyone. "Hello?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. The footsteps stopped. Then, slowly, something began to emerge from the passage wall, not walking through the entrance, but literally stepping out of the solid rock. It looked almost human, but wrong in ways that were hard to describe. Its body seemed made of the same stone as the cave, with glowing blue-green fungi growing through cracks in its surface. Where a face should be, there was only a smooth area with depressions that might have been eyes. We backed away until we hit the far wall. The stone figure took another step forward, stone flowing like thick mud with each movement. "Don't move," Marcus whispered. "Maybe it tracks movement." We froze, hardly daring to breathe. The figure stopped, its head-like upper section turning slowly as if scanning the room. After what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, it turned and stepped back into the wall, disappearing completely. The moment it was gone, Mike broke down. "We're going to die down here," he sobbed quietly. "That thing is going to get us just like it got the others." "We don't know that," I said firmly, though my heart was racing. "And we're not giving up." I laid out our map and tried to figure out where we were and how to get back to known passageways. As I studied it, I realized something strange. I could picture passages that weren't on the map, as if I'd seen a more complete version. Without thinking, I took out a pencil and began drawing new tunnels, my hand moving almost on its own. "Deb, how do you know these passages exist?" Marcus asked, watching me work. I don't know," I admitted. "It's like they're in my head somehow." "The dreams," he said. "You said you dreamed about ancient rituals, right? What if something down here can put images in our minds?" The thought should have terrified me, but strangely it made sense. Ever since we'd entered the new section, I'd felt a presence in my mind, subtle at first, but growing stronger. "If that's true," I said slowly, "then maybe it's been leading us somewhere all along." Just then, Lisa's headlamp flickered and went out completely. She quickly grabbed her backup, but it too failed to turn on. "My batteries are all dead," she said, panic edging into her voice. One by one, our lights began to dim. Within minutes, we were down to just my headlamp and Marcus's, both growing noticeably weaker. "It's happening again," Mike said. "Like with the first group's equipment." In the fading light, I noticed the wall behind him beginning to shimmer slightly, as if it was becoming less solid. "Mike, get away from the wall!" I shouted. He turned, but too late. A stone-like hand emerged and grabbed his shoulder. Mike screamed as he was pulled backward into the seemingly solid rock. Lisa and Marcus rushed forward to help, but by the time they reached him, only Mike's hand was still visible, straining outward before it too was pulled into the stone, leaving nothing but smooth wall behind. "No!" Lisa screamed, pounding on the wall where Mike had disappeared. I pulled her back. "We can't help him by staying here. We need to move." With just 2 dim headlamps between the 3 of us, we hurried from the chamber, following the new passages I had somehow added to our map. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked as we moved. "I think I know where the missing cavers are," I said. "And maybe Mike too. There's a big chamber ahead, bigger than any we've mapped before." "How do you know this?" Lisa asked, her voice shaking. I touched my temple. "It's in my head. Something's been putting these images there. I think it wants us to find this place." "That sounds like a trap," Marcus said. Maybe, I agreed. But it's also our only chance to find Mike and the others. As we moved deeper, the cave changed again. The passages became more regular, almost architectural. And on the walls, the strange symbols appeared more frequently, glowing with the same blue-green light as the fungi. Finally, we came to a massive door-like opening in the rock. Beyond it, our weak lights revealed the edge of an enormous cavern. "This is it," I whispered. "The cathedral chamber." We stood at the entrance to the cathedral chamber, our weak headlamps barely cutting through the darkness. The cavern was enormous, so big that our lights couldn't reach the other side or the ceiling. "This shouldn't exist," Marcus whispered. "A chamber this size would have collapsed long ago without support." As we moved forward, our lights revealed what was holding up the ceiling, dozens, maybe hundreds of stone columns. But they weren't natural formations. Each one looked partially human, as if people had been frozen mid-transformation into stone. Lisa grabbed my arm. "Deb, look at their faces." I raised my light and felt my stomach drop. The face on the nearest column was contorted in fear, its mouth open in a silent scream, and it looked recent. "I think I'm going to be sick," Lisa said, turning away. I moved my light across the chamber and spotted something that made my heart race. Equipment. Modern caving gear scattered around the base of several columns. "The missing team," I said, hurrying over. The gear was there, helmets, packs, climbing equipment, but no people. As I examined a backpack, my light caught something moving in the distance. "Someone's there," I whispered. We approached cautiously. In the dim light, I could make out a figure slumped against one of the columns. As we got closer, I recognized him. Dr. Winters. Marcus. But that was impossible because Marcus was right beside me. I turned to look at the Marcus next to me, then back at the one against the column. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice shaking. The Marcus beside me looked equally confused, staring at his double. "That's me," he said. The figure against the column stirred and raised its head. It was Marcus, but changed. His skin had a grayish tint and patches of the glowing fungi grew along his neck and cheek. When he saw us, his eyes widened. "Deb," he croaked, "run! It's a trap." I looked back and forth between the two identical men, my mind racing. How do I know which one is real? The Marcus beside me grabbed my arm. "I'm real, Deb. We came down here together, remember?" "Don't listen," the other Marcus said, his voice strained. "It took my form. It's been with you since the collapse." A horrible thought dawned on me. I turned to the Marcus beside me. "Where did we first meet?" He hesitated just for a second. "At the university, during your doctoral presentation." "Wrong," I said, backing away. "We met at a climbing competition before my accident." The fake Marcus's face changed, the human features melting away like wax. In their place formed the smooth, featureless head of the stone creature we'd seen earlier. Lisa screamed, and we both backed away as the thing that had pretended to be Marcus stepped toward us. "It's been leading us here all along," I said, my mind racing. "The dreams, the map changes. It was all this thing." We backed up until we reached the real Marcus, still slumped against the column. Up close, I could see he was partially embedded. In the stone, his right arm and shoulder already merged with the column behind him. "What happened?" I asked him, keeping one eye on the approaching creature. "They're called the Ossuary Collective," he said weakly. "They're ancient, been here longer than humans. They need to collect people every 52 years. "Collect?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "Absorb us," Marcus said. "Add our consciousness to theirs. They've been doing it for thousands of years. There are hundreds of minds in there." The stone creature stopped a few yards away. Behind it, more figures were emerging from the walls and columns of the chamber, dozens of them, all with the same smooth, featureless heads and bodies that seemed to flow like thick mud with each movement. "What do they want?" I asked. Guardians, Marcus explained. They protect something deeper in the cave system, and they think by absorbing us, they're giving us a gift, immortality as part of their collective. The creature that had pretended to be Marcus stepped forward again and spoke, not with a mouth, but somehow directly into our minds. "We have waited for you, Deborah Mitchell," it said, its voice like stone grinding against stone. "You hear us. You see us. You are meant to join us." I stepped back, bumping into the column where Marcus was trapped. "How do you know my name?" "We have known you since you first entered our home," it replied. "We have tasted your dreams. We have felt your peace in the darkness. You belong with us." More creatures emerged from the walls, surrounding us in a circle of living stone. "What about the others?" I demanded. "The missing cavers? Mike?" "They are becoming part of us," the creature said, "as all who enter our sacred chamber must." It gestured to the columns around us, and with horror I realized that each one contained a person in various stages of transformation. Some were recent. I recognized the missing cavers, their bodies half stone already. Others were ancient, with only the barest suggestion of human features remaining. "You can't do this," Lisa said, her voice breaking. "We're people, not things to collect." "We do not collect things," the creature replied. "We preserve consciousness. We remember every mind we have joined with. In us, nothing is ever truly lost." As it spoke, I felt something brush against my mind, the faint echo of other consciousnesses. Hundreds of voices, some as old as the cave itself, all preserved within the stone. "Deb," Marcus whispered urgently, "my pack, UV light. They can't stand it." I glanced down and saw his backpack on the ground. Slowly, I knelt as if giving up, but instead reached for the pack. "We will not harm you," the creature said, moving closer. "Joining with us is painless. You will be part of something eternal." "Sorry," I said, pulling out the UV light used for tracking certain bacteria. "I prefer being temporary and free." I switched on the light, aiming it directly at the creature. The effect was immediate and violent. The stone figure recoiled, its surface cracking where the light touched it, the blue-green fungi growing on it shriveled and blackened. "Lisa, the water!" I shouted, remembering the pool we'd passed on the way in. Lisa understood immediately. She unclipped her water bottle and splashed it at the nearest stone figures. They recoiled again, the water seeming to confuse them, their movements becoming sluggish and disoriented. "Iron!" Marcus gasped, his voice weaker now. "They can't pass through iron. Use your pitons." I grabbed the iron climbing spikes from my pack and began placing them in a circle around us. The stone creatures stopped at the boundary, unwilling or unable to cross. "We need to get out of here," I said to Lisa. "Help me with Marcus." But when I turned back to him, I saw it was too late. The stone had crept further up his body, now reaching his neck. "Leave me," he said. "I can help you escape, but you have to do something for me." "Anything," I promised. "Complete the ritual," he said, nodding toward the center of the chamber where a raised stone platform stood. "It will force them into dormancy for another cycle. 52 years of sleep." "How do you know this?" I asked. His eyes met mine, and I saw something ancient and knowing behind them. "Because I'm already part of them," he said. "Enough to know their secrets, but not enough to lose myself. Not yet." "What do I have to do?" I asked Marcus, my eyes darting between him and the stone creatures hovering just beyond our iron barrier. "The altar at the center," he said, his voice growing fainter as more of him merged with the stone. "There's a pattern carved into it. You need to fill the grooves with iron and blood." "Blood?" Lisa whispered, horrified. Marcus nodded weakly. "Human blood? Not much, just enough to complete the circuit." I looked at the center of the chamber where the stone altar stood. It was about 30 feet away, with several of the creatures between us and it. "How do we get past them?" I asked. "Can distract them," Marcus said. "Their consciousness is connected." If one feels strong emotion, they all focus on it. I shook my head. No, Marcus, that would speed up your absorption. He smiled sadly. I'm already gone, Deb. This way, at least I can help you get out. I wanted to argue, but the determined look in his eyes stopped me. This was his choice. What do we do with the iron? I asked instead. Break up the pitons, he instructed. Place the pieces in the grooves on the altar, then add a few drops of blood to each one. I nodded, fighting back tears. And then, get out, fast. The ritual puts them to sleep, but it takes a few minutes. To affect them all, I took a deep breath and gathered the iron pitons from our makeshift barrier. Using a rock, I broke them into smaller pieces and put them in my pocket. Ready? Marcus asked. Lisa and I nodded. When I say go, run straight for the altar, he said. Don't stop for anything. He closed his eyes, his face contorting in what looked like pain. The stone around him began to pulse with blue-green light. What are you doing? The stone creature nearest us asked, its mental voice sounding alarmed. Something you didn't expect, Marcus answered. Then to us, go, now! We ran, breaking, through the circle of iron pitons. Behind us, Marcus let out a scream that echoed through the chamber. The stone creatures all turned toward him, drawn by whatever he was projecting into their shared consciousness. Lisa and I sprinted toward the altar. One creature noticed us and reached out, but it moved sluggishly, confused by Marcus's distraction. We reached the altar, a flat stone table covered in spiral grooves that all led to a central depression. Quick, I said to Lisa, pulling out the iron pieces. Put these in the grooves. We worked frantically, placing pieces of broken piton in each groove. The metal seemed to fit perfectly, as if the grooves had been designed for it. Now the blood, I said, pulling out my knife. I sliced my palm, wincing at the pain, and let the blood drip onto each piece of iron. The metal seemed to absorb it, growing darker. Yours too, I told Lisa. She hesitated only a moment before cutting her own palm and adding her blood to the iron pieces. As the last drop fell, the entire altar began to glow with a dull red light. The grooves lit up one by one, creating a spiraling pattern that made my eyes hurt to look at. It's working, I said. But then I looked up and my heart sank. The stone creatures had stopped focusing on Marcus and were now moving toward us, faster than before. They knew what we were doing. We need to go, I said, grabbing Lisa's arm. Which way? She asked, her voice tight with fear. I looked around desperately. The creatures were closing in from all sides, leaving only one path open, deeper, into the cave. This way, I said, pointing to a dark passage beyond the altar. We ran, the creatures close behind. The passage sloped steeply downward, taking us even deeper underground. Behind us, I could hear the strange grinding sound of the stone creatures moving, but it seemed to be getting fainter. I think they're slowing down, Lisa called. I glanced back and saw she was right. The creatures were still following, but their movements were becoming sluggish, as if they were fighting to stay awake. The ritual's working, I said. We just need to stay ahead of them until they're all asleep. The passage opened into another chamber, smaller than the cathedral, but still impressive. What made me stop in my tracks was what I saw on the far wall, a shaft of light coming from above. Is that daylight? Lisa asked, her voice full of hope. I moved closer, examining the narrow crack that let in the faint light. It's a chimney. To the surface, I said. It's tight, but I think we can climb it. We began to climb, using natural handholds in the rock. The chimney was barely wide enough for our bodies, forcing us to press against the walls and inch our way up. Below, I could hear the stone creatures entering the chamber, but their movements were now very slow, almost frozen. They're falling, asleep, I said to Lisa, who was climbing just above me. After what felt like hours of painful climbing, we reached the top of the chimney. It opened onto a hillside covered in forest, miles from where we'd entered the cave. The late afternoon sun nearly blinded us after so long in darkness. We pulled ourselves out and collapsed on the ground, breathing the fresh air deeply. "We made it," Lisa whispered, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to feel relief, but something felt wrong. Looking down at my hands, I noticed tiny glittering patches on my skin, almost like crystal growing in small clusters. "Lisa," I said, showing her my hands. "What is this?" She examined them, her face growing pale. "It looks like calcite, like the formations in the cave." I touched one of the patches. It didn't hurt, but it felt strange, neither fully part of me nor separate from my skin. "What does it mean?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but we need to get you to a doctor." As we started walking toward what we hoped was civilization, I couldn't stop thinking about Marcus, now fully absorbed into the collective, and about the whispered voice I'd heard in my mind just before we escaped. "We will wait for you, Deborah. You are still ours. You will return to us." 3 months have passed since Lisa and I crawled out of that chimney. The official report says we were the only survivors of a tragic cave-in that killed 4 people: Marcus, Mike, and the 2 missing cavers. The report blames structural collapse and hallucinations due to oxygen deprivation for what we experienced. No one believed our story about living stone creatures or a ritual altar. Even Lisa started to doubt her own memories after a while. Maybe it was easier that way. I took a leave of absence from the park service. The doctors couldn't explain the crystal-like growths on my skin. They took samples and ran tests, but found nothing they recognized. Eventually, the patches stopped spreading, but they didn't go away. My hair has changed too. Strands of it have turned hard and clear, like thin crystals growing from my scalp. I keep it covered with hats now. I dream about the cave every night. Not nightmares exactly. In the dreams, I'm walking through passages I've never seen, mapping them perfectly in my mind. Sometimes I hear Marcus's voice, but it's different now, like it's mixed with hundreds of other voices, all speaking as one. I rented a small cabin near the park. In my basement, I've created a map room where I draw the passages I see in my dreams. The walls are covered with detailed charts of cave systems that no human has ever officially discovered. The strange thing is, when park scientists explore new sections of Mammoth Cave, they keep finding passages exactly where I've drawn them. Last week, I went back to the park office to check some old records. While I was there, I convinced a friend to let me listen to the audio recordings from the cave monitoring system, the microphones that record seismic activity. What I heard confirmed my fears. Every single recording device in the cave system had picked up the same whispered message exactly 1 year from the day we escaped. "We are waiting for you to return to us, Deborah." I know now that I didn't really escape. Part of me is still down there, merged with the collective. The crystals growing on my skin are just the visible sign of a deeper change. I've set up a monitoring system of my own. I track unusual mineral growth throughout the cave system using data from the park's sensors. The patterns match the symbols I saw in the cathedral chamber. They're waking up again, sooner than they should. The 52-year cycle is accelerating. I think it's because of me, because I'm connected to them, but not fully part of them. Yesterday, I found myself standing at the main entrance to Mammoth Cave, not remembering how I got there. A park ranger found me staring into the darkness with my hand outstretched, as if something was calling me in. I've locked away my grandmother's turquoise ring, the one that supposedly protects against hollow earth spirits. I'm afraid of what might happen if I take it off completely, but I'm more afraid that I might want to. Sometimes, late at night, I hear stone grinding against stone in my walls. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see something standing behind me. Something with my face but smooth and featureless where my eyes should be. I don't know how long I can fight this pull. The crystal patches are spreading again, forming patterns that match the ancient symbols from the cave. I've left this record in case I disappear. If you're reading this and I'm gone, don't come looking for me in Bone Hollow. I'm no longer just Deborah Mitchell. I'm becoming part of the inheritance, the latest consciousness, to join an ancient collective that has waited in darkness since before humans walked the earth. And the worst part, a growing part of me wants to go back. My name is Diane Mercer. I'm 36 years old, and I work as a ranger in Redwood National Park in California. Most people come here to look up at the giant trees, but I'm the one who studies them, counts them, and fights to protect them. The trees here are ancient. Some have been alive for over 1,000 years. They stand tall like nature's skyscrapers, making you feel tiny when you walk among them. The forest floor is always damp, covered in soft moss and fallen leaves that squish under your boots. When it rains, which is most of the time in winter, the whole forest seems to come alive with the sound of water dripping from every leaf and branch. I wasn't always a ranger. I used to be what some people would call a tree hugger, an activist who chained herself to trees to stop logging companies from cutting them down. Now I work for the park, using my knowledge of plants to protect these giants in a different way. Around my neck, I wear a small glass pendant with a tiny redwood seed. Inside, it came from the first tree I ever saved from being cut down. In my pocket, I always carry my grandfather's wooden compass. He carved it himself and told me it would always point toward home. I'm not sure that's true anymore. Home feels far away these days. People aren't really my thing. I prefer the company of trees. They don't judge, they don't argue, and they've seen more of history than any human ever will. My father used to tell me I had forest in my blood, but that was before we stopped talking. He was a logger, cutting down the very trees I fought to save. The last time I saw him was at a protest I organized. There was an accident with one of the machines. He survived, but he blamed me. Sometimes I still hear his voice in my dreams, calling me a traitor. Lucky for me, I'm not completely alone out here. Jack Powell works with me on my current project. He's 42, tall with a scruffy beard, and knows the forest almost as well as I do. What makes Jack special is that he used to be a logger like my dad, but now he helps protect the trees. He's like a bridge between my world and the world I left behind. Diane, you planning to stare at that notebook all day, or are we heading out? Jack's voice broke through my thoughts as he approached my small ranger cabin. The morning light was trying to push through the heavy fog outside. Just finishing up yesterday's notes, I said, closing my worn field notebook. We need to survey the North Valley today. There's a section of old growth that hasn't been properly documented. Jack nodded, adjusting his backpack. Weather report. Says more rain coming. We should get moving before it hits. I grabbed my rain gear field kit and the special coring tools we use to take samples from trees without hurting them. The North Valley was one of the most remote parts of the park, a place where some trees had never been catalogued because the steep terrain kept loggers away even before this became protected land. As we hiked deeper into the forest, the usual sounds of birds and small animals seemed to fade. I hadn't noticed it at first, but now the silence felt strange. Even Jack sensed something was off. Awful quiet today, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if he didn't want to disturb. Whatever was making the forest so still, we reached our first survey point by midday. The trees here were massive, their trunks wider than my cabin. As I set up my equipment, something caught my eye on a nearby redwood, a perfectly round hole about halfway up the trunk. Jack, look at this, I called out. Have you ever seen anything like it? He came over, squinting up at the strange hole. It was too perfect to be natural, a cylinder that seemed to go straight through the trunk. That's not normal, he said, stating the obvious, and I don't remember seeing it when we did the preliminary survey last month. I checked my notes to confirm. You're right, it's not in my records. As I stepped closer to examine it, a chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold, damp air. Something about that hollow felt wrong. And as I would soon discover, it was just the first sign that something in my beloved forest had changed. That first hollow tree was just the beginning. Over the next week, Jack and I found more trees with the same strange holes, perfect circles that went all the way through massive trunks. What made it extra weird was that these weren't new trees we were finding. They were trees we had already checked and written down in our notebooks just a month ago. Trees that definitely didn't have holes before. Maybe it's some new kind of woodpecker, Jack suggested one afternoon as rain dripped from his hat. I shook my head. No bird makes holes this perfect, and no woodpecker could drill through 6 feet of solid redwood. The holes weren't the only strange thing happening in the forest. Places that should have been busy with animals were empty and quiet. Spots where I usually saw deer, squirrels, and birds were now completely silent. It was like the animals knew something we didn't. One morning, I took some soil samples near one of the hollow trees. Back at my cabin, I looked at them under my microscope and saw something that made my stomach twist into knots. "Jack, come look at this," I said when he stopped by with coffee. He leaned over my shoulder and peered into the microscope. "What am I looking at?" "Fungus networks," I explained. "See how they connect between the trees? That's normal, but look at the pattern." The tiny threads of fungus that usually grow in random directions were forming perfect straight lines and angles like someone had drawn them with a ruler. "That's not natural," Jack whispered. "No," I agreed. "It's not." As the rain kept falling day after day, the forest paths turned into small streams. The main road into this part of the park was blocked by a mudslide. Our radio started acting funny, too. Sometimes it worked fine, but other times all we got was static, especially when we were near the trees with holes. At night in my cabin, I started having strange dreams. I would see eyes watching me from behind tree bark, blinking slowly. I'd wake up sweating, even though my cabin was cold. One evening, after a long day of finding more hollow trees, I was washing mud off my boots when I spotted something stuck in the treads. I picked it out and nearly dropped it when I realized what it was. A small wood carving tool. Not just any tool, but one with my father's initials carved into the handle. It was one of his favorite tools, one I'd seen him use 100 times when I was a kid. My hands shook as I stared at it. My father lived hundreds of miles away. We hadn't spoken in years. There was no way his tool should be here, stuck in the mud on my boot, unless he was here. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Jack said, coming around the corner with firewood for my small stove. I quickly slipped the tool into my pocket. "Just tired," I lied. "It's been a long day." That night, the rain pounded harder than ever on my cabin roof. I lay awake, listening to the forest outside. Between the raindrops, I heard something else, a creaking sound, like trees moving. But there was no wind. The next day, we went deeper into the valley than we'd ever gone before. The trees were even bigger here, and the fog hung low between them. It was like walking through a dream. "Do you smell that?" Jack asked suddenly, stopping in his tracks. I sniffed the air. There was the usual smell of wet earth and pine, but underneath was something else, sweet but rotten, like fruit gone bad. "It's coming from over there." I pointed to a grove of trees ahead. As we got closer, the smell got stronger. Then we saw it, a circle of redwoods, all with the same perfect holes running through them. The holes were at the same height on each tree, like they were doorways of some kind. I took a step toward one of the trees, feeling drawn to the hollow. The air around it seemed to shimmer slightly. "Diane!" "Don't," Jack said, his voice tight. "Something's not right." Just then, we heard a voice calling from deeper in the grove. It sounded like one of our junior rangers, a college kid named Tyler, who was supposed to be mapping the eastern section today. "Tyler?" I called out. "Is that you?" the voice called again, sounding farther away now. "We should check if he's okay," I said, already moving forward. Jack grabbed my arm. His face looked pale. "Diane, Tyler isn't supposed to be in this sector. He's 10 miles east of here." A cold feeling spread through my chest. If Tyler wasn't here, then whose voice had we heard? As if answering my question, the voice called once more. This time it didn't sound quite human. "We need to go back," Jack whispered. "Now." As we turned to leave, I noticed something on the ground near one of the hollow trees, a small survey marker, the kind we use to mark trees we've studied. But this one wasn't ours. It was old and rusted, with a date stamped on it. 1958. My father would have been a young man then, just starting his career in the forests, and now his tool was in my pocket, found in this same valley. What was happening to my forest? And what did my father have to do with it? The questions swirled in my mind as Jack and I hurried back toward my cabin, both of us feeling the weight of unseen eyes watching from the trees around us. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain hammered against my cabin roof like it was trying to get in. I kept thinking about those hollow trees and the strange voice we had heard. I took out my father's tool and turned it over in my hands. How did it get here? By morning, the rain had eased to a steady drizzle. Jack arrived early, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "Bad dreams?" I asked. He nodded, pouring himself coffee from my pot. "Kept seeing eyes watching me from inside tree trunks. Silly, right?" My mug stopped halfway to my lips. "I've had the same dream." We looked at each other, a new kind of fear settling between us. "We need to understand what's happening," I said finally. "Let's check the park records. Maybe someone has seen these hollow trees before." The ranger station had files going back to when the park was first established. We spent hours looking through dusty folders, reading reports from rangers who had worked here long before us. "Look at this," Jack said, pushing a folder toward me. It was dated 1976, almost 50 years ago. Inside was a report about 3 loggers who had gone missing in the North Valley. They were found a week later wandering in the forest. The report said they were disoriented and physically altered. "Physically altered?" I read aloud. "What does that mean?" Jack turned the page to show me a medical report. The doctor wrote that the men seemed hollow inside, like their organs had been removed, but they had no wounds. A chill ran down my spine. I remembered stories my grandfather used to tell me, stories he had learned from the Yurok people who had lived in these forests for thousands of years. Stories about the hollow people who lived inside trees and collected human essence. "There's more," Jack said. He showed me reports from the 1980s and 1990s, all describing strange events in the North Valley. Trees that seemed to move between surveys, people reporting being watched. The weird thing was, all these reports had been filed away and forgotten. No one had connected them together. As we read, the radio on the desk suddenly crackled to life. Through bursts of static, we heard a voice. "Help! Something in the trees! They're not help!" Then silence. Jack tried to call back, but there was only static. That sounded like Tyler. We grabbed our gear and headed out, driving as far as we could before the muddy roads forced us to continue on foot. The forest felt different today. The air heavier, the silence deeper. Even the constant drip of water from the leaves seemed muted. "The signal came from near observation point 7, I said, checking my map. "That's close to the circle of hollow trees we found yesterday." As we walked, I noticed Jack kept rubbing his arm like it bothered him. "You okay?" I asked. "Just a scratch," he said quickly. Too quickly. We trudged through the wet forest for hours, calling for Tyler. The only answer was the echo of our own, voices bouncing back from the massive tree trunks. When we reached observation point 7, we found Tyler's backpack hanging from a low branch. His notebook lay open on the ground, soaked through with rain. The last entry was half finished. Strange sound coming from inside the tree. Going to check if... That was it. Look, Jack pointed at the ground. Leading away from the notebook were footprints that headed toward a massive redwood about 50 yards away. As we got closer, I saw it had one of those perfect hollow openings. The footprints led right up to the tree and then stopped. It's like he walked right into it, I whispered. Jack nodded, his face pale. He reached out toward the hollow, his fingers inches from the opening. Don't touch it. I grabbed his arm and pulled it back. That's when I saw it. A thin, root-like structure under the skin on Jack's wrist, visible through his sleeve that had ridden up. It looked like a small vine, growing just beneath his skin. Jack yanked his arm away, pulling his sleeve down. It's nothing, he said roughly. I told you, just a scratch. But I had seen enough. Whatever was happening in this forest had already touched Jack. The question was, how far had it spread? Back at my cabin, I locked the door and pulled all my botanical research books from the shelf. If this was some kind of fungus or parasite, maybe I could find information about it. I worked through the night, reading everything I could about symbiotic relationships between fungi and trees. Near dawn, I found something that made me sit up straight. There were documented cases of fungal networks connecting trees in ways that almost resembled a nervous system. Some scientists had even suggested that forests might have a kind of collective consciousness through these networks. But nothing explained the hollow trees or the root-like growth I'd seen on Jack's arm. As the sun started to rise, I heard a soft knocking at my door. Thinking it was Jack, I opened it, only to find no one there. Instead, on my doorstep was another of my father's tools, a marking hammer used to stamp logs with an owner's brand. I picked it up with shaking hands. The brand on the hammer was my father's personal mark, one I would recognize anywhere. When I looked up, I caught a glimpse of someone walking between the trees at the edge of the clearing. They were too far away to see clearly, but something about the way they moved reminded me of my father. "Dad!" I called out, but the figure disappeared into the mist. My radio crackled suddenly, making me jump. Through heavy static, I heard a voice that turned my blood cold. "Diane, come to the hollow trees. I need to show you something important." It was my father's voice. That voice on the radio, my father's voice, shouldn't have been possible. The radio barely worked these days, and my father hadn't spoken to me in years. Yet I'd heard him as clearly as if he was standing beside me. I tried calling Jack, but got no answer. With no other choice, I packed my backpack with essentials. My flashlight, first aid kit, water, and a small can of fungicide spray I used for treating infected trees. After a moment's thought, I also grabbed a lighter and a small bottle of alcohol from my medical supplies. Something told me I might need fire. The forest felt different as I made my way toward the hollow tree circle. The constant dripping of water had a rhythm to it now, almost like a heartbeat. The fog curled around my legs like fingers trying to hold me back. Every few steps I felt like someone was walking just behind me, but when I turned, no one was there. When I reached the circle of hollow trees, the air was thick with that sweet rot smell. The ground felt spongy under my boots. I called out for Jack and Tyler, but only silence answered. That's when I saw the junior ranger's hat lying near one of the hollow trees. I walked toward it, my heart beating fast. The hat was muddy, but otherwise empty. No sign of Tyler. "Hello, Diane." I spun around. Jack stood just behind me, but something was wrong. His movements were stiff, mechanical. His eyes seemed duller than usual. "Jack, are you okay?" I asked, taking a step back. "Never better," he said, but his voice was flat. "I want to show you something amazing." He held out his arm and pulled up his sleeve. The root-like structures I'd seen before had spread, covering most of his forearm in a network of thin, greenish-brown lines just under his skin. "They're connecting me to everything," he said. To the trees, the soil, the air, I can feel the whole forest now. Jack, that's not normal, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Something's happening to you. We need to get help. He shook his head slowly. No help needed, just acceptance. They've been waiting for someone like you, Diane, someone with forest in their blood. Who has? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. The Arbor Collective, Jack said, gesturing to the trees around us. The old ones, they've been here since before humans walked these forests. As he spoke, I noticed movement at the edge of my vision. The hollows in the trees seemed to be changing, widening, and inside them were those eyes? It started when the logging companies came too close to this valley, Jack continued, his voice becoming less his own with every word. The collective needed to understand its enemy, so it studied us. It learned from us, and now it's ready to defend itself. By hollowing out people? I backed away, my hand slipping into my pocket where I kept the fungicide spray. Jack's face twisted into a smile that wasn't his. Not hollowing, transforming, connecting. The same way trees connect through root systems, the collective connects through us. Something moved behind Jack. From one of the hollow trees, a figure began to emerge. It looked almost human, but was made entirely of twisted roots, bark, and leaves. Its eyes were dark knots in the wood, and its mouth was a gash. In the bark, I couldn't help it, I screamed. The figure tilted its head, studying me like I was some strange insect. More figures began emerging from the other hollow trees, each one a walking piece of the forest. What do you want? I asked, my voice shaking. Jack answered, but his voice now sounded like rustling leaves. We want you, Diane Mercer. Your knowledge, your connection to this place, your forest blood. One of the tree figures stepped forward, reaching for me with branch-like fingers. I pulled out my fungicide spray and aimed it at the creature's face, pressing the button. The misty spray hit the wooden face, and the creature recoiled with a sound like breaking branches. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush. Behind me, I heard Jack call my name, his voice mixing with other voices that sounded like wind. Through trees, I didn't stop running until I reached a small stream that cut through the forest. Remembering the old stories my grandfather told me, I splashed across it, hoping the running water might offer some protection. On the other side, I paused to catch my breath and think. Those things, the Arbor Collective, had somehow taken over. Jack, they were using him like a puppet, and they wanted me next. As I leaned against a tree, trying to calm my racing heart, I felt something odd about the bark under my hand. It was warm, almost hot to the touch. I pulled my hand away quickly and saw a small indentation forming where my palm had been, as if the tree was softening like wax. I backed away, watching in horror as the indentation grew deeper, forming a small hollow. Inside, something moved. No place was safe, not even on this side of the stream. I needed to get back to my cabin, to my books and research. There had to be a way to stop this, to save Jack and Tyler, and to protect myself. As I turned to go, I spotted something hanging from a branch nearby, another of my father's tools, a small saw used for pruning. It swung gently in the still air, as if someone had just placed it there. "Dad," I called softly, "are you here?" A rustling in the bushes made me spin around. A figure stood partly hidden by the trees. For a moment, I thought it was one of those tree creatures, but then I caught a glimpse of a familiar flannel shirt and worn cap. "Dad, is that you?" I took a step forward. The figure moved deeper into the trees, but not before I saw its face clearly. It was my father, but something was wrong. His eyes had the same dull look as Jack's, and there was something moving beneath the skin of his neck, like roots shifting under soil. "Come to the center, Diane," he said, his voice hollow. "It's the only way to understand." Then he was gone, slipping between the trees like a shadow. I stood frozen, tears burning my eyes. Whatever had taken Jack had my father too. How long had he been here, trapped in the forest? Had he come looking for me? One thing was clear. I couldn't run away. If I wanted to save Jack and my father, I had to understand what the Arbor Collective was and how to stop it. With a deep breath, I turned back toward the circle of hollow trees. If answers existed, that's where I'd find them. But this time, I'd be ready. I didn't go straight back to the hollow trees. That would be suicide. Instead, I returned to my cabin to prepare. If I was going to face these tree creatures, I needed to understand them better. My hands shook as I flipped through my research notes. Something kept nagging at me about the fungal networks I'd seen in the soil samples. The way they connected the trees wasn't just strange, it was important somehow. In one of my older botany books, I found something interesting. Some fungi can control insects, basically turning them into zombies. Could a similar thing be happening here, but with people? I also remembered something else. When I sprayed the tree creature with fungicide, it backed away. And Jack had mentioned how the collective felt the whole forest. Maybe the fungal network was like their nervous system. I grabbed my backpack and filled it with supplies. My fungicide spray, a small saw, the lighter and alcohol for making fire if needed, and a portable radio. I had a theory that the mechanical sounds disrupted them somehow. I'd noticed they never appeared near the ranger station where our equipment hummed all day. As I was about to leave, I caught sight of my father's wooden compass on my desk. I picked it up, running my thumb over the worn surface. "I could use some direction now, Grandpa," I whispered, tucking it into my pocket. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, but the forest was still shrouded in mist. Every tree looked like it might be hiding something. Every sound made me jump. I took a different route to the hollow trees, following the stream for as long as I could. Water seemed to slow them down, at least a little bit. When I could see the circle of hollow trees through the mist, I stopped and turned on my radio. I tuned it to static and cranked the volume as high as it would go. The harsh noise cut through the silence of the forest. Almost immediately, I heard movement, agitated rustling from the direction of the hollow trees. Good. The noise bothered them. I crept closer, the radio hissing in my hand. The circle of trees came into view, and what I saw made me gasp. In the center of the circle was a shallow pit, filled with what looked like a thick web of roots. And tangled in those roots were people, or what used to be people. I could see Tyler, his body half sunk into the mass. Nearby was Jack, standing unnaturally still, roots visibly moving under his skin. And there, on the far side, was my father. He looked older than when I'd last seen him. His face lined with new wrinkles, roots wound around his arms and legs, connecting him to the mass in the pit. "Dad!" I called softly. His head turned toward me, his eyes clearing slightly at the sound of my voice. "Diane, is that really you?" "It's me, Dad. I'm going to get you out of here." Jack's head snapped toward me. "You shouldn't have come back," he said, but his voice sounded strange, like he was fighting to speak his own words. I held up the radio, and Jack winced at the sound. "I know what you are now," I said, addressing not just Jack, but the entire grove. "You're using the fungal network to control people, to hollow them out and use them." The air in the grove seemed to thicken, and I felt a pressure in my head, like something was trying to push into my thoughts. "We do not control," a voice said in my mind. "We connect, we share, we survive." By taking over people, I challenged keeping the radio high. By learning, humans cut, humans burn. We must understand to protect. As the voice spoke in my head, the roots in the pit began to move. They rose up, forming a rough shape that looked almost like a giant face. "Your kind threatens our existence," the voice continued. "We have lived in harmony with the forest for millennia. Then your machines came, your saws, your fire." I thought about the logging companies pushing at the park boundaries, about the constant battle to protect these ancient trees. In a way, I understood their fear, But this isn't the answer, I said. Taking people, hollowing them, it's wrong. We do not understand wrong. We understand survival. As it spoke, roots began to snake across the ground toward me. I stepped back, raising the fungicide spray. Stay back, I warned. This can hurt you. The roots paused, but I could feel the creature's anger like a physical force. You work to protect us, yet now you threaten us. Why? Because you've taken people I care about, I said. Release them. Let them go and I'll help you find another. Way to protect yourselves. The face in the roots shifted as if considering. Your mind holds knowledge we need. Your connection to the forest is strong. Join us willingly, and we will not need these others. It was offering a trade. Me for Jack Tyler and my father. I looked at my father's face, seeing the pain and fear there. Diane, don't, he said weakly. Run. But I couldn't run. Not anymore. If I join you, you'll let them go? All of them? The root face wavered. Your father has valuable knowledge of the machines that hurt us. We need this. Then take me instead, said a gruff voice. My father was struggling against the roots that held him. My daughter has forest in her blood. She can protect you better than I ever could. Let her go, and I'll stay willingly. Dad, no, I cried. But my father looked at me with clear eyes, clearer than I'd seen in years. It's okay, Diane. I came. Here looking for you, to apologize. After the accident, I was wrong to blame you. You were only protecting what you loved. Tears blurred my vision. After all these years of silence between us, to hear those words now. We accept this exchange, the voice said in my mind. The roots around my father tightened, pulling him deeper, into the mass. At the same time, the roots holding Jack and Tyler loosened. Jack fell to his knees, gasping as if he could finally breathe again. Dad! I lurched forward, but Jack grabbed my arm. Diane, don't, he said, his voice his own again. If you get too close, they'll take you too. I watched in horror as my father was pulled into the root mass. His eyes met mine one last time. I'm proud of you, kiddo, he said. Then he was gone, sinking into the living mass at the center of the grove. The pressure in my head subsided. The roots retreated. Tyler groaned, beginning to stir. We have what we need, the voice said quietly in my mind. Go now. Take the others. Jack helped me get Tyler to his feet. The junior ranger was weak but alive, the root-like structures under his skin already beginning to fade. What about my father? I asked, my voice breaking. He is part of us now, the voice said. His knowledge helps us understand. Protect the forest boundaries, Ranger Mercer. Keep the machines away. That is how you honor him. As we stumbled away from the hollow tree circle, I felt the weight of both loss and responsibility settling on my shoulders. My father had sacrificed himself to save me, to save all of us. Now I had to make sure his sacrifice meant something. Behind us, the hollow trees seemed to close ranks, the perfect circular openings slowly narrowing until they were just knots. In the bark, hiding places for whatever waited inside. 3 months have passed since that day in the grove of hollow trees. The winter rains finally stopped, and spring has brought new growth to the forest. New growth everywhere except the North Valley. Jack recovered quickly once we got him back to the ranger station. The root-like structures under his skin disappeared within days. Tyler took longer to heal. He doesn't remember much, just fragments of dreams about being connected to something, ancient and vast. He transferred to another park last month. I don't blame him. I filed an official report about what happened, but I was careful about what I wrote. I said we found a new type of fungus that caused hallucinations and strange growths on the skin. I included soil samples showing the unusual fungal networks, but left out the part about trees that moved and spoke in people's minds. My boss read the report with raised eyebrows, but didn't question it too deeply. The North Valley is now marked as a restricted research zone. No visitors allowed, limited ranger access, just as the Arbor Collective wanted. Sometimes I sit on my cabin porch at dusk, looking toward the distant line of trees that marks the edge of the North Valley. On rainy days, when the forest is wrapped in mist, I think I see a figure walking along that boundary, a man in a worn flannel shirt and logger's cap, checking the soil with familiar tools. Jack has seen it too, though we rarely talk about what happened. Some things are too strange, too painful to put into words, but sometimes, when we're deep in the forest together, we'll hear a whisper in the rustling leaves that sounds almost like my father's voice. "How's it going, kiddo?" I keep my father's wooden compass with me always now. Strangely, it doesn't point north anymore. Instead, it points toward the valley of hollow trees, toward home, just like my grandfather said it would. Last week, I found something interesting in the archives. Old Yurok stories about forest guardians who sometimes took human form to teach respect for the ancient trees. The stories said that people with forest in their blood could sometimes hear the guardians speaking through the trees, especially after heavy rains. I've established new protocols for the park rangers, based partly on these indigenous stories. We avoid certain groves during the rainy season. We limit the use of power equipment near the North Valley. We mark trees in specific ways that don't harm the bark. Some of the other rangers think I'm being superstitious. Maybe I am. But when the wind blows just right through the redwoods, I hear that voice again, not just my father's voice, but many voices blended together, ancient and patient. "Protect us," they whisper. "Keep the boundaries safe." And I will, not just because I promised, but because I understand now that the forest is more alive, more aware than I ever imagined. The trees may not think or feel the way we do, but they know how to survive. They've been doing it for thousands of years. Sometimes at night I dream about the hollow trees. In my dreams, I walk into one of those perfect circular openings and find myself in another world, a green, ancient world where everything is connected by living threads. My father is there, not trapped but transformed, his knowledge and love spreading through root networks that span miles. He smiles at me in these dreams, looking younger than I remember, and says, "There's so much more to learn, Diane." I always wake from these dreams with tears on my face, but a sense of peace in my heart. Whatever the Arbor Collective is, fungus, spirit, or something science hasn't named yet, it isn't evil. It's just trying to survive, like all living things. Jack asked me last week if I'm afraid to stay here, so close to the hollow trees. I told him the truth. I'm not afraid anymore. We've reached an understanding, the forest and I. As long as I help protect the boundaries, the hollow trees will stay in their valley. As long as I listen when the forest speaks, my father will continue to walk the edge of the woods, making sure both worlds stay in balance. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, when I press my hand against the bark of an ancient redwood, I feel a warmth that has nothing to do with temperature, a recognition, a connection. The forest knows me now, and I finally understand what my father meant all those years ago. I truly do have forest in my blood.